What's up out there? I know opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. And most of the time, they stink. But this fucking dude set up here and what he was in, what he had took part in changed the whole fucking world and killed a lot of people, man. And for him to sit up there and plead the fucking the Fifth Amendment shouldn't apply when you got something this big that has changed the outcome of the whole world. The Fifth Amendment, nah. You should have took the Fifth Amendment when you started speaking out and trying to tell everybody how to deal with this shit. Now let's watch some of this idiot right here.
Not being gain of function.
So
let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans.
Right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about.
When the first time I seen Rand Paul question him in the Senate, that was the last time you seen Fauci on TV. Do you remember that? Y'all remember that far back?
5 years since that moment, and tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m., we finally get to see the encore. We're very excited for what's going to happen tomorrow. Thanks to Senator Rand Paul, the world now has access to Dr. Fauci's diary, the retired mad scientist who loved all the fame that he gained at the height of the pandemic that he helped to start. We'll have plenty of spotlight and cameras on him tomorrow, forced to answer for many revealing moments from his pandemic paper trail. So many things to talk.
I don't know anybody that COVID hasn't affected in one way or another, either by losing somebody, financially fucking them up, just something to do with COVID has not been good for him. And to not hold this dude accountable.
Talk to Fauci about. It's going to be an interesting day. It starts early. Dr. Robert Redfield is the former CDC director, and he joins us now. Sir, it's good to have you on. They were getting into gain of function there. We all seem to know the truth on that. He's trying to deceive with how things are defined and that kind of stuff. But do you think we can get Fauci tomorrow to admit that he in some way funded this lab that we now believe created this virus?
Well, I hope he does. I hope he tells the truth. I hope he provides an explanation for why he made the decisions that he made.
Look, here's the deal. He don't have to tell the truth. There is records where it shows that he was funding that clinic or whatever you want to call it over in Wuhan. He don't have to confess with his mouth. All you have to do is just follow the money.
I'm not certain we're going to get that. But Rand Paul's done a great job in trying to bring this to the American public and see. I just hope that he is forthright and honest and tells the truth. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Rand Paul, just posted earlier today that if Fauci lies tomorrow, he's not going to be covered by that preemptive pardon that he was given from Joe Biden. And by the way, who needs a preemptive pardon? Which, that just really...
That's unconstitutional anyways. You don't get a pardon for something that wasn't a crime or you hadn't been charged with a crime. That really just kind of seals it and lets you know that they knew that they had fucked up.
Screams something. What's your take on all this? What's your take on Tony Fauci?
Well, I'm disappointed. I think he clearly misled Congress. He clearly misled the media, and he clearly misled the American public on a number of issues. I was very disappointed to read some of his diary, which I didn't know existed. It was very problematic when I saw the attention that he was paying to his own notoriety, which I seem to think was highly misplaced. He was supposed to be focused on the public health response for the American public, and it did seem he put a lot of focus on how he was perceived in the media and the famous people that he got to meet. I'm just hopeful that he stays in the hearing for a couple hours and he doesn't somehow exit early with some excuse and answers his questions, similar to what he did in the Missouri deposition, where almost every question he was asked, he said, I don't remember, I don't recall, I'm not sure, I don't remember, I don't recall.
Right.
But if he does, when they ask people, what is true, Dr. Fauci, is what you said in public on this day, and they have the tapes, is that truth, or is it what you entered on your diary this day?
Right.
Because they don't go together.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways. Which one is true?
Well, let's look at some of the diary here. It spanned 3 years. On lockdown, school closures, he had written in March 15, 2020. It's like day one of the pandemic. They spoke with de Blasio, mayor of New York, convinced him to close the New York City schools, said we should close bars and restaurants as well. He talked about this in his own diary. He had a similar call with Gavin Newsom's chief of staff, convinced California, close the schools, close the bars and restaurants. 2 years later, when we all learned a lot more about...
I really do. I thank God at that time, Florida did not follow this idiot's instructions. They, we caught a lot of flack for that. Like, we were taunted and, we was made to look stupid. People thought the governor of Florida at the time was a fucking idiot. And thank God that he didn't cave to the peer pressure from all these idiots, and he let us continue to work. And I will say that traffic coming into Florida on 95, Jesus fucking Christ, you couldn't hardly get into the state because people from New York and other places that had been closed down were trying to get here. That's when I kind of was looking around like, what the fuck is going on out here, man?
About the direction that we should have gone with this and that we should have probably moved toward herd immunity. And after we saw the tremendous damage that was done to our economy and to our education system, here's how Fauci sounded on these same issues.
They always come back and say Fauci was responsible for closing schools. I had nothing to do.
I mean,
let's get down to the facts.
You're not the head of a school board.
Exactly.
But that's a very telling moment right there. How do you take that?
Yeah, I think, Rob, I think there's a number of those as you go through it. And it's very sad because on this issue, I was a strong proponent that the public health interest
his fucking ass. I honestly, for people like this, man, I think we ought to stone them in the fucking street, for lack of a better term. People like this need to be stoned in the street. Too many of them get away with doing this type of shit or something to this effect, and they don't pay the price for it.
So the K through 12 was best served by staying in face-to-face learning.
Middle of town fucking square, and let people that was affected by this shit come by and just chunk a rock at him. It might not, do much good, but it'd damn sure make him feel better. I promise you that.
And I really tried hard to keep the schools open. I was very much against this 6 foot distancing, which I didn't think there was any scientific evidence for, which if you did 6 months distancing, the consequence was you close schools, and Fauci, I talked to de Blasio also, I took a different position that I thought it was in the interest to keep the schools open. I thought it was just, disheartening for me to see him say that he had nothing to do with that when in fact he was on the phone trying to convince the mayor and the governors. And we were on phone calls with the vice president, with most of the governors and most of the states and in the White House task force. And Tony took the position that we should obviously close the schools and shut down.
In my opinion, the reason that they listened to this dude and the reason that they were doing all this modification anyway was for a fucking bioweapon. They were going to use this type of shit for a war. I honestly believe that.
Restaurants and bars. I think that policy was a big mistake.
Right.
It's one thing to do the Mike Pence idea of taking a knee for 15 days and try to figure out how to keep these activities going in a safe way. It was another thing to shut them down. And that was a huge policy mistake. I'd love him to just say, I did the best I could. And in retrospect, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. I just published my own book, Redfield's Warning. Yeah. I encourage the audience to listen to, take a read of it. And in that book, you'll see that almost every chapter I said, we got that wrong. We got that wrong. In retrospect, that was a mistake. I just think coming clean and acknowledging the mistakes would be, in his best interest.
I got 30 seconds left. I want to just speak to a second. I mean, if depending on what channel you watch, there's a very different story of Tony Fauci and of COVID and everything. And that's what's so scary to me. We have from Mehdi Hassan, who used to work for MSNBC. COVID was not a lab leak, he says. In fact, more agencies say it was natural origin than say it was a lab leak. That's a tweet from this week from a person that worked in the mainstream media for a very long time. What do you say to that?
Well, it's just not truthful. As you know, all of the major intelligence agencies have now concluded that it's much more likely they came from the lab. And there's
Of course
no
it came
doubt
from the lab. You motherfuckers made the shit. I thought they were going to read the damn diary off on this one. Let's see if damn Glenn does. Let me speed him up just a little bit.
If you don't like Fauci, you're not going to be disappointed. I'm not going to do anything that is going to make you like him.
See, I don't agree with this, right? With this laughing and shit, because there's nothing about this that's fucking funny, man. If you've lost somebody or have been affected by this in any way, nothing about this is fucking funny. How you can laugh about it in any kind of circumstances, just fucking wild.
Do like him, you might be disappointed.
What's up,
because he's really, truly an egomaniac monster. There is a story out now. His diary has just been released, and if you read his diary, it's not really the best. Did I lose that stupid diary? Where is that diary now? Do you have it in front of you?
Which one?
The diary with the quotes in his diary.
Yeah.
Okay. Give me some of the quotes of the diary. I just lost it.
So on January 26, 2020, Fauci writes in his diary, "Now we know the market was not the source." So he's talking about the Wuhan, wet market where they were, cooking up all that amazing bat soup.
Yeah.
Because it's natural origin. So it started in the animals there and spread from the market. So we were told.
Yeah.
But this one clearly says, now we know the market was not the source. It was the amplifier. So not exactly what we were hearing.
The
in public.
amplifier. Wait a minute. What do you mean the amplifier?
So I think what he's talking about there is that's where it just kind of went on steroids and started spreading all over the place.
Yeah, because the front door of the lab is right there at the wet market. That's why.
Yeah, literally like a football store.
You know what kills me is, remember when we did this special on this and we showed that they had a lockdown at the laboratory. I think it was in November. And then they went in and they completely redid all of the venting and the ductwork and everything. They had a complete emergency cleaning and ventilation of that a month before we saw the first outbreak.
Yeah.
And you had doctors that were sick.
See, that's bullshit. Let me tell y'all something. I've got fucking proof of it that my wife had contracted COVID one fucking year before it was ever announced. My wife gave blood all the time. She still does, but she gave blood at Walmart on that blood drive bus. And they mailed her a letter saying, hey, the last time you gave blood, you had antibodies for COVID. Would you mind donating again? I've got that letter put up somewhere. Now, how would she had the antibodies for COVID if she didn't have it? And she went, man, I'm going to say there was about 3 months that year that she was sick. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? You need to go to the doctor. You're bad, man. And she just stayed sick for a long time. And not to give away where my wife works at, but she works where it's really, really cold all the time. And I thought, well, maybe it's just her being, in a cold environment like that. And then coming out in the heat, it's not doing good. But that ain't what it was. She had contracted COVID somewhere. And it was a year fucking before.
There. And Fauci knew at that point.
Now, she
by December,
she doesn't sell blood on me. She just donates it to the bus in front of Walmart.
Or Fauci knew.
Many people think their only options to get out of debt are making minimum payments,
Yeah, it was out before
bankruptcy,
then, Kevin,
or
for sure.
a consolidation loan.
Yeah, there's additional stuff just on that entry alone, and I'm reading from another summary of this. So privately in his diaries, Fauci was admitting that basically he no longer believed that the wet market was the origin, and you had to be basically an idiot because Wuhan, Institute of Virology is right there. But a week later,
he knew all of the things that we proved 6 months into this.
Right.
Anyway, go ahead.
And anyone that disagreed with natural origin was an idiot and deserves to be shamed.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes.
So a week later, he convenes a call with 12 scientists. You want to know how many of them thought that it was, natural origin spillover from animals?
Yeah, that's
out
what
of those
she
12.
does it, bro.
Only 2. Only 2.
They got a blood drive bus that comes in front of Walmart and parks up there, and you go in there and donate and shit. They'll give you like a damn discount coupon or whatever, but it's just helpful. She's got that type O negative, I think, is rare blood, so she does try to donate.
2. The rest of them are like,
She thinks she's doing her part first, or let her do her thing. Besides, she's when she comes out of there, she's a little more dizzier than when she went in, and I fuck with her, so it's pretty comical sometimes.
dude, Doc, it's kind of, this is looking fishy here. But that is not what we heard. The consensus was from all the academic papers was that, no, this is natural origin. You know, if you think this is an outbreak, gotta be an idiot.
Yeah, and it was made to look like there were only 2 in the room that didn't think that. Remember?
Yeah.
Because we reported it at the time, and it was made to look like 2 walked into that room to disagree with what the other 11 and saying, no. And it was the consensus. But apparently that's not it. Now, again, all of this is now according to his own diary. This is not speculation. These are the words in his own diary. All right, what else?
But also to that, why would you be concerned about this not being natural origin? Why would you be concerned if this could possibly been manipulated in a lab? If you're in the United States government with control of all these funds that are going out all over the world to possibly
Kevin, I hope you're all right, bro.
support things like gain-of-function research, why would this concern you so much? Maybe because you
were the one
releasing some of these funds to places like China? Maybe that would look bad.
So when you get into this, now we're going to show you some of the things he said, because he's an out-of-control egomaniac. When you get into this part, understand this is the main thing you have to know about this guy. And here's why. He is the wrong kind of, he has no humility in him at all. And so when we had a law that said you can't do this, he felt he was right. And so he was going to do it anyway. And come hell or high water, he would find a way to do it. And then he covered it all up. So the guy who is literally, I believe, responsible for millions of dead.
Oh yeah, he is definitely, in my opinion, responsible. I'm telling you, it would not do good for me to ever see that old motherfucker somewhere. I'll just tell you that. COVID would be his last concern.
One guy, and it's Fauci. And anyone else that was in on this project with him. But Fauci knew it, and he just felt it was too important to let the law stop them. So he found a way around it. Now, if you think that's bad, listen to some of the things that he said in his diary about his fame.
Gosh,
it's grotesque.
Good deal.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that, Kevin. Cancer can be some fucking horrible. Well, I mean, it can't not be, but cancer is horrible as fuck, dude.
If you even just leave out some of his personal phone calls with people like Barbara Streisand and how he's convincing her to get an mRNA vaccine. Oh, and another little anecdote about how he's teaching Barbara Streisand how to use the Alexa device. He's also saying things like this, quote, one person said that Tyra Banks was sexy, but that I was even more sexy than she was.
Oh my gosh.
right.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yes, you know.
He should start it. Another 1,200 dead this morning. But you know, they said that Tyra Banks was sexy, but I'm even more
But
sexy.
on the bright side.
I'm the sexiest man alive. I mean, it's horrible.
And following up with that, quote, I kind of feel like I should say, Dear Diary, quote, Dear Diary, press still hot and heavy about me. Multiple stories per day, directly or indirectly involving me. Oh yeah.
Gosh. Oh my God.
It goes on. Multiple entries like this. Where
He talks about, and you know, I got a exciting phone call today. They asked me to be on Dancing on with the Stars. Can you maybe pay attention to the millions that are dying? I found some other ones here, Jason, that, you know, the press doesn't have yet. Deaths just crossed 70,000. Tragic, of course. But on a lighter note, a woman in line in the pharmacy recognized me and started crying. Not from the virus, but because she was meeting me. I signed her N95. She said, I'll never wash it again. Let's see. April 9th, another 1,800 dead today. Tough, huh? But the Washington Post just called me the most trusted man in America. I'm thinking about having that embroidered on my lab coat. August 4, another 1,200 lives lost overnight. Devastating. But on the upside, my Wikipedia page just hit 1 million views in 24 hours. I've asked the NIH communications team to start tracking Fauci mentions per death. It seems important for historical records. I mean, the guy could have written those. When you read his diary, he could have written those. He was that out of touch. Do we have the InStyle magazine cover?
It's on my computer now.
Okay, well, I don't think people can see your computer. I tell you what, why don't you just come over and lean over his shoulder?
I think they can bring it up.
Can you bring it up? Anyway, so there's a picture of Fauci, and he is in style, the cover, and he's got his sunglasses on. He's sitting by the pool, and it's grotesque. When you see it, it's absolutely grotesque.
And now reading these diaries and knowing how infatuated he was with all the attention and fame, the look on his face right there just
look at that.
makes me nauseous.
Look at that. I have to tell you, he's coming to Washington to testify in front of Congress. Rand Paul is going to be there. It should be interesting. Now, here's the thing. He can't incriminate himself because he is already pardoned for everything he did in the last 10 years. So there's nothing that they can get him on. He could go on and say, yeah, 5 years ago, I was doing X, Y, and Z. I have nothing to do with it now. And there's nothing anybody.
So they couldn't find him guilty of anything that he's done in the last 10 years. And he was still such a fucking coward the way he handled it.
He can do about it. However, my guess is, and I could be wrong, my guess is he's going to plead the fifth. And here's why this is a problem. He can't incriminate himself for past crimes. So if he pleads the fifth, that would be covering a new crime. And what's going to happen is Rand Paul is going to ask him all of exactly the same questions that he asked the last time or the last 10 times he testified. And Fauci was very specific on how he answered everything. Well, we now have all of the evidence that he was lying, but he's covered because of Joe Biden and the auto pin pardoning him. So what Rand Paul is trying to do is get him to say,
I don't know if that auto pin is going to hold up. Something tells me that they're going to fucking figure out that it was unconstitutional to use that auto pen, and especially when it comes to pardons. Watch and see.
do you still stand by that? Yes. Can you tell me? I'm going to ask you the same question. Can you tell me, were you doing any of these things? He would have to answer no. If he answers yes, that's a new crime. Okay. Or if he answers no and stays consistent, it's a new crime. And so what he's going to say is, I think I plead the fifth. Because he either has to, and he's too much of an ego. He either has to say, no, I was lying to you, and that he won't get prosecuted for that. I was lying to you. Nope, that's not true. I don't believe that. He won't go to jail for that. However, he has too much of an ego to say he was lying.
What's up, sour poison?
And so the only thing his attorneys are going to say to him is then could just plead the fifth. Plead the fifth. If he pleads the fifth, we know he was lying. Because that's the only reason.
Not just in America, but around the world. Joe Biden's auto pen doesn't cover him for crimes he did around the world, because that was a world event. That wasn't just an American event. So I don't see how that's going to do him any good. But
why you would do it, because that's the only new crime.
I'm curious about the gain of function question that I know Senator Paul's going to ask him. I feel like that would be the easiest one, to where you've got a lot of data to back up the fact that they were funding what looks like gain of function over there. Mm-hmm. The reason I say looks like,
because they changed the definition.
There's so many ways you could weasel out of that, right?
No. No. If you define it the way Rand Paul has and the way the United States always has. But when Fauci testified,
let me tell you something. If he goes to jail, he is absolutely, in more ways than one, because I promise you, they're going to do something to him. Too many people were affected by this.
Remember right, the NIH went in and changed the definition. After his testimony, they changed the definition to match what he said. So, no, the only game you're playing is the game he set up.
Okay, so now I'm less optimistic than I was before in the Insider segment about
why.
Well, the way you're describing it right there sounds like there are ways that they can be like, well, based off this definition.
Well, that's what he's going to do. Because that's what he did towards the end, when they were like, that's not even the definition. That's the official definition. I don't know how you define it, but that's how we define it. And that was the game he played. The only chance I'd like to have Rand Paul on, because he's been thinking about it. I think the only way you really get him here is if he perjures himself, because that's a new crime. But I think he's too smart to perjure himself. He would listen to his attorneys and plead the fifth, but he is so arrogant. That's his Achilles heel. In his arrogance, it could be his downfall.
Well, let's watch and see what he did.
Senator Alling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, nothing says honesty like taking the fifth, huh, Doc? Let's try something. What day of the week is it today?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color tie are you wearing?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What color is the carpet in front of you?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Let's just get one thing straight. You don't have any rights under the Fifth Amendment because you've been pardoned, as you very well know. As the Supreme Court has been clear for a century and more, Brown versus Walker, 1896, when he has been pardoned, he may not stand upon his privilege. You know that. Your lawyer is sitting behind you now, shifting nervously in their chairs. They know it. This isn't about the Constitution. This isn't about the law. This is about contempt. Contempt for this body and contempt for the American people. But I think I know why you're doing it. It's because you don't want to answer questions. It's because you did all kinds of terrible things. It's because during the pandemic, you got rich, didn't you? You got rich while people were dying, hundreds of thousands of Americans, over 1 million in the end, and you were getting rich. And not only were you doing that, you were using federal employees with taxpayer money to apply for and solicit cash prizes for you personally, cash prizes totaling over $1 million. You did all of that during the pandemic, didn't you? That's a question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
You remember Greg Folkers? Who was that?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Your chief of staff is the answer. Do you remember Patricia Conrad? Who was that?
What's up there?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
They need to tie this motherfucker up in town square, and underneath their rights to the Constitution, just beat the living fuck out of this motherfucker within an inch of his life.
Your personal assistant. And what were these individuals?
It's fucking crazy. For every person that lost somebody that they love behind this motherfucker's games that he was playing, shit, that would be too good for him, Jimmy. They need to tie this motherfucker up around the Statue of Liberty and letting people just beat the living fuck out of this motherfucker. See, shit like this makes me sick, dude. It really does. It pisses me off. It pisses me off to no end, man.
Doing in the depth of the pandemic in November of 2020, when millions of Americans were suffering from COVID, what were they doing? I tell you what they're doing. Folkers was on your behalf soliciting and gathering information for a cash award. Let's look at it. We've got his email right here, right over my shoulder. Folkers says, I'm working on this nomination for the Dan David Award for Fauci. We need to beef up the COVID part. Do you have language in the can that you could share that delineates how we responded in new ways to COVID? He sends this to multiple federal employees. What was the Dan David Award? Do you remember, Doc?
This is how my employees clock in today.
This little thing has helped my business save tens of thousands of dollars.
Remember how we used to clock in?
Yeah. Nothing says you're guilty like fucking just repeating the Fifth Amendment. I reserve the right underneath the Fifth Amendment. No, you shouldn't have no fucking rights.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
It was a $900,000 cash award. $900,000 cash award. And he got it because he used federal employees to get it. And this wasn't the only award, was it, Dr. Fauci? In fact, you applied for and received at least 8 other federal cash prizes on federal time using federal employees and federal resources. Here they are over my shoulder. Besides the Dan David Award, you've got the Partnership for Public Service. You've got the Adelson Prize. You've got the Smithsonian Award. You've got the National Academy of Medicine's Award. You've got the CDC Foundation. In fact, you turned your staff into a full-time application machine. You actually wrote to people and said, do you think maybe I'd qualify? And you got cash for all of this. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 employees, was it? In fact, you used 8 separate federal employees on federal time using federal resources to solicit cash awards. Isn't that true?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights
They ought
under
to
the Fifth
freeze
Amendment
his
to the
fucking bank account. If this is true, I didn't know he got cash rewards from him, but if this is true, they ought to freeze his bank accounts because God, believe me, they'd freeze mine and yours.
Constitution.
Here they are right over my shoulder. Here's all of them. The people that you use, federal employees, so that you could go and get cash money. And the most hilarious part is that you weren't content to even dragoon them into applying for all of these cash awards. You then had them go out to the ethics agencies and ethics watchdogs and demand that you be able to get the money. That's right. We've got it in your emails. Your staff and employees on federal time, using federal resources, being paid with federal dollars, are soliciting cash for you. And then they're turning around and saying to the agency, we don't want just an answer. We want to get to yes, because Fauci wants the money. He wants it. We want to get to yes, and yes takes time. This is your chief of staff again, using federal email to pressure the agency's own ethics people so that you could get money, so that you could get rich. And it violated the law, didn't it, Dr. Fauci? Didn't it? It violated the law, didn't it? It is a question. You can answer. Go ahead.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Federal law, as you very well know, prohibits the solicitation of cash awards or other personal benefits for federal employees. And it certainly prohibits using your own employees to do this. 5 CFR section 2635-205B. It says it right there in black and white. You cannot use federal resources, federal dollars, federal employees, federal offices, federal email, federal time to solicit cash awards. And you did all of it. And the worst part is thousands of people were dying while you were doing it. You were supposed to be the nation's doctor and you're playing one on TV, but this is what you were doing with your time. Isn't that true?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why. I can certainly see why. You know what I can't quite figure out is that why you were so obsessed with it, because you're already rich. I mean, and your scheme worked here. I mean, your net worth now is north of $12 million. You got over $1 million in cash awards during COVID, during a 12-month, 24-month span during COVID. $1 million you knocked down in cash money using federal resources. Now you're worth more than $12 million. You've got a pension that in its first year paid out north of $400,000 a year. 1 million people dead, you're getting rich. 1 million people dead, you're using federal employees to get cash awards for you. 1 million people dead, and you're here taking the fifth because you don't want to admit that what really happened in all that time was a multi-month, multi-year course of self-dealing. Isn't that true, Dr. Fauci?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah, well, silence is admission. And here's the real thing. At the end of the day, it wasn't just about the money, really, was it? It was really about a power trip. I mean, through all of this, you want to be the most famous scientist in the world. You were so focused on getting every award and every drop of cash that you could, all because you wanted to be on TV. You wanted to be the sun god of science. You wanted to be the guy who was in charge of it all. You wanted to lambast Trump. You wanted to make sure that nobody else stole your spotlight. You wanted to be the guy. You had time to sit for InStyle magazine. Here's what you were doing with your time. You could sit for InStyle magazine, but you can't answer questions for the American people. You could sit for InStyle magazine, but you're here taking the fifth. You could sit for InStyle magazine and get $1 million in cash awards, but now the cat's got your tongue. I bet he does. I tell you what, here's my conclusion from all of this. This was really all about you the whole time. Somewhere along the way, you lost your way. You may have been a good public servant at one time. I don't know. But I can tell you from reading your emails now, from looking at what you did, how you used your employees, somewhere along the line, it became all about you. You became a narcissist and a megalomaniac and a liar. And you've lied to the American people, and you've lied to this body. And you've disgraced your profession by doing it. You called yourself the most famous scientist in the world. You've done more to harm science than anybody in my lifetime. And I hope you'll go home and write that in your diary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. I hope they make this motherfucker pay. I don't know if it's political theater or not, but I will say this. What he did affected a lot of fucking people. A lot of people. And with everything that's going on today, man, along with the Epstein list, this shit here, and people are waking up. And I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be good if they don't do something about it, because people are not just going to sit back and watch all this shit and unfold and not get some kind of justice, because that right there would just lead to all out war. I hate to say it, but it would. And I'm not advocating for that, but that's what's going to happen.
You will respect these proceedings. You were told not to sit at the table. You insist on sitting at the table, and we told you you would not be recognized. You are not invited here for testimony, sir. You are being disruptive. Would you behave this way in a courtroom? No, because the judge would put you in jail. I can't do that today, but I can have you escorted from the premises. So I would say, sir, sit quietly and don't say another word. I said, sit quietly. You are not recognized. Another word and you're gone. There's a row behind you, sir. That's where you were told to sit, and you're not. And now you're disrupting the proceedings. And so, look, this is the way Anthony Fauci wants to be remembered, for a lawyer not listening to the rules. That's the way you want to be remembered, and that's what you're going to do. You are not recognized, sir. Security, please remove him from the room. Let the record state that Dr. Fauci will still have the advice of the other half of us.
Sir, what were you trying to say in that room?
Yeah, it's all, that shit's all for fucking show, man. That I agree with you. That shit's for show. Yeah. They said that, pimp, you know, it's funny you say that, because they said that when you're in deep shit, that's who you use.
We're asking yourselves privately. You even cited proximal origin from the White House podium. You held it out as evidence that the virus could not have been engineered, but you didn't disclose your role in the discussions that preceded the writing of the paper. You did not disclose the author's original concerns. You did not reveal that you had been part of the paper, that you had read and offered editorial comments on the paper before it was published, before you began using it as evidence that it couldn't have originated in the lab. You did not disclose that you had immediately investigated yourself whether NIAID funding might be connected to the research. You did not tell the American people the full story. Duly released private messages indicate that the doubts with the authors and others didn't disappear after the publication. So while this was being waived at the White House to show that it couldn't come from the lab, the authors were still privately continuing to assign a meaningful probability to a laboratory origin, one thing in public and another in private. Some of the same scientists discussed avoiding email and carefully managing communications that might eventually be obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. The pattern is straightforward. Privately, there was alarm, then an immediate inquiry to see if NIAID's possible exposure to funding, then a rapid public declaration of certainty, continued private doubt, and then years of resistance to disclosure. The question is why? The only logical answer is that your primary concern was avoiding culpability. Your primary concern was hiding the fact that you had approved the funding for this dangerous research. Your support of gain-of-function research.
Let me ask you this, then. Why are so many Democrats taking up for Dr. Fauci, if you believe that? I mean, everybody's got the right to their own political view, right? But they're trying to use this as Trump grandstanding or some crazy shit. And it just seems like the Democrats do that a lot. Now, like I say, I'm not attacking you for liking Democrats or Republicans. I think the older I get and the more I pay attention, I think they're all fucked up. And the whole point behind having two sides is to keep everybody fighting with one another, so they don't join forces and try to fight this shit. It's not about Democrats or Republicans anymore. It's about saving Americans and about saving America. How in the fuck can you let people over here? And I know this is kind of getting off topic, but how the fuck can you let people over here, just like this Mandarin thing that's going on in New York City right now? Muslims killed over 3,000 people in New York City. Why would you put that shit in their fucking face? That shit is crazy. When you really look at it, man, look, I don't care where you come from or what your belief is, but this is a Christian nation. If you don't want to live in a Christian nation, don't fucking come here. Because it's not right to try to change my way of life or my beliefs to satisfy some fucking foreigner that comes here and tries to settle. That shit it's starting to get out of hand. People are going to end up paying for it. Watch.
Is extensive and longstanding. In 2011, your agency funded Ron Fauci's laboratory when it mutated the avian flu until it could spread through the air between mammals.
If you can hear people talking but can't understand them, watch this.
Best way to hear clearly again at 75? $5,000 hearing aids? No.
What's up, Just Joy? How you doing, sweetheart?
This was the tipping point. This is when others became worried. You funded this. You advocated for this. The federal government's own biosecurity board, though, recommended withholding the details of these experiments because of the danger the research posed. People were concerned that publishing it was publishing a roadmap to creating bioweapons around the world. But you sided with the gain-of-function scientist Fauci and argued that the benefits of publishing the research far outweighed the risks. You defended this avian flu transmissibility experiments as critical research. You wrote that even if a scientist became infected and triggered a pandemic, the benefits of the gain-of-function experiments outweighed the risk. In 2014, your agency, NIAID, began funding the Wuhan bat coronavirus work. In 2015, Ralph Barrick and the Chinese scientist Shi Zhengli published NIAID-supported research combining a bat coronavirus spike protein with a SARS backbone. The resulting virus could infect human airway cells. It's a novel virus that now can infect human cells. It gained transmissibility. It gained function. In 2018, the same group of scientists, EcoHealth, Barrick, Shi, and their collaborators submitted the diffuse proposal, which involved the insertion of a furin cleavage site into the coronavirus. DARPA rejected it as too dangerous. When COVID was sequenced, though, early on in January of 2020, within days, scientists discovered that, lo and behold, it had a novel furin cleavage site, just as had been proposed in the diffuse product. This was either an extraordinary coincidence or a smoking gun, evidence that the Chinese had created COVID-19. It made the laboratory origin question more legitimate, and it made your categorical public denials indefensible. On May 11th, 2021, you told the Senate, the NIH has never, ever, and does not now fund gain-of-function research in Wuhan, in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. When I gave you the opportunity to correct the record, to reconsider the statement, you responded that you had never before lied to Congress. We were then told that only the government's narrowest regulation of definition counted here, that you could define gain-of-function.
But you better believe they didn't just send them over the United States for no reason. There was a reason and a purpose behind it. Solar panels, fucking cameras. They were doing something. They were doing something.
Way in which this,
and Joe Biden just let them float on over. You know why? Because he was paid $2 million fucking dollars, in my opinion, or millions of dollars.
Wasn't gain of function, in which all of the common sense of the world would be thrown out, all of the idea that the mice were dying and the virus was more transmissible didn't matter because you had a technical definition that allowed you to fund it. But the real question is, was it dangerous? Was it a wise decision to fund this? And you haven't deviated from that. You've never admitted that it could have been a mistake funding this research in China. The American people weren't asking for a...
If you ask me, Joy, I think it was it was more easier and cheaper for them to release the balloons and let them fly over the country to see what farmland was where without sending people around and doing any kind of research. I don't know. There was something to it. They were mapping something. That part's obvious, but what they were mapping, I don't know.
Semantics debate over what is gain of function. They're asking, does common sense say this research was dangerous in Wuhan? They wanted to know whether their money-funded experiments in Wuhan that made bat coronaviruses better able to infect humans. The answer is yes. They wanted to know whether NIAID adequately supervised their work. The answer is no. When you defended this research, you described its benefits in the broadest terms. But when Congress demanded accountability, you hid behind the narrowest possible definition. You can't have it both ways. Your conduct concerning federal records raises further questions. It is a crime to destroy federal records. Yet our investigation reveals your assistant diligently reported that she deleted tons of emails. In 2024, you testified that you did not delete federal records. Who's telling the truth? You or your assistant? The committee has obtained repeated instructions from you telling federal officials to delete communications. On February 2nd, 2020, one day after Origin's call, you told Francis Collins, please delete this email after you read it. The committee asked for your voluntary cooperation to come today. Your appearance had to be compelled by subpoena. You're here today under duress. You're here today because of the court ordering it. President Biden issued you a sweeping pardon extending back to 2014, the same pardon he gave to his son, Hunter. A pardon may protect a person from criminal prosecution, doesn't rewrite history. It does not erase documents. It does not convert a misleading statement into a truthful one. And it does not prevent Congress from establishing what happened. There will be another pandemic. There will be another crisis. And there will again be officials who insist that uncertainty must be hidden for the public's own good. They will demand obedience. They will invoke science. I am the science, as though it were a commandment. They will argue that government officials cannot be questioned because questioning them would undermine public trust. They have it backwards. It is secrecy that destroys trust. It is arrogance that destroys trust. It is censorship that destroys trust. And it is the refusal to admit error that destroys trust. That loss of trust may be your most damaging legacy. Trust can't be ordered. It has to be earned. No scientist is above scrutiny. No government official is beyond accountability. And no public servant has the right to treat the suffering of millions of Americans as a footnote to his preferred version of history. I now recognize Senator Peters for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee has a long and a very proud history of conducting serious oversight on behalf of the American people. When this committee has been at its best, Democrats and Republicans have worked together to investigate complicated issues, to follow the facts wherever they may lead, and produce recommendations that actually strengthen our nation's security and improve government functions. That bipartisan tradition has produced meaningful work following Hurricane Katrina, the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, failures at the Secret Service, and countless other matters. Unfortunately, today's hearing is the latest step in the chairman's sharp departure from that long tradition. This hearing appears to be a culmination of months of biased and selected efforts by the majority under the guise of a committee investigation to basically legitimize a predetermined conclusion that was reached years ago. In 2021, the chairman has called for today's witness to be fired, to be arrested, accused him of leading cover-ups and conspiracies. He has even featured the witness prominently in fundraising emails and on the cover of his book. He has also called for the cancellation of the witness's security detail, despite the fact the witness and his family have received numerous credible death threats.
That's my wife in the truck here in Orange County, Florida.
Yep.
14 million views as of this morning.
Mm-hmm.
The comments are exactly what you'd think they are.
Yeah.
So I let her take the truck.
Shut the fuck up.
When I served as chairman, Senator Paul and I launched a bipartisan biosecurity investigation that included oversight of risky research and the origins of COVID-19, because we agreed that the committee's work would be stronger if we did it in a bipartisan manner and just followed the facts. That was and continues to be an area of legitimate and certainly needed oversight. As chairman, Senator Paul has taken the opposite approach. He has abandoned longstanding practice by blocking minority participation in committee oversight actions and has chosen to selectively release committee records that the minority has never had any access to in order to support his pre-drawn conclusions. The chairman has repeatedly excluded committee's minority and withheld documents and evidence from members that are entitled to receive them, disregarding longstanding Senate rules and committee precedent that have preserved the credibility of our oversight in this committee for decades. I have raised these concerns directly with the chairman because it's not just what we investigate that matters, but how we conduct that investigation. That also matters. One-sided investigations designed to validate predetermined conclusions do not serve the American people who sent us to actually uncover the truth and to solve problems. I wrote to the chairman requesting that he adhere to committee rules. But instead of addressing concerns that I raised, he removed part of the committee's website from the public view. This move not only prevented the public from being able to view those list of concerns, it adds serious questions about the desire for transparency and legitimate oversight of this matter. But what makes today's hearing particularly disappointing is not simply the chairman's actions, but what we could be using this committee's true and time oversight responsibilities to accomplish. This committee has not held its annual threats hearing at all in this Congress. We have not held a budget hearing for the Department of Homeland Security. There are important hearings that we would have the opportunity to discuss as to how to strengthen our Homeland Security across the board. No hearings on those topics. Instead of focusing on the national security challenges that we are facing in our country right now, today's hearing looks backwards, revisiting questions this committee has already examined, including through bipartisan work that Senator Paul and I conducted together when I served as chairman of this committee. But rather than building on that work to strengthen our preparedness against future disasters, we are instead relitigating the past. COVID-19 exposed serious deficiencies in our nation's public health infrastructure. We know that. More than 1 million Americans lost their lives, and this committee should absolutely continue to examine how
would somehow the research in Wuhan. There have been, we told them the access. They never asked for the access code. They haven't been on the website because they have not cared about the investigation. It's a practice of this committee to swear in the witness. Dr. Fauci, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Sure, he swears to God because he ain't testifying.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Member Peters, members of the committee, I served at the NIH for over 54 years 38 of those as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Over that period, I proved that I believe in and respect the value of legitimate congressional oversight. In fact, I testified before and/or briefed Senate and House Senate and House committees well over 200 times over those 38 years. During and after the COVID pandemic, I have appeared multiple times for hearings in the Senate and the House.
I don't know why they're calling it a pandemic. It was a weaponized virus. That shouldn't be called a pandemic. In my opinion, it should be called an attack, because that's what it was.
Usually under oath.
It was an attack on the human race.
And sat for several days-long transcribed sworn interviews answering questions about the very issues that are now the subject of this hearing. However, given Senator Paul's obvious obsession with calling for my prosecution, his repeated slanderous comments about me, and recently his publicly releasing my unredacted personal diary aimed at embarrassing and intimidating me, the only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars, unquote. Any reasonable person who has followed his unhinged obsession with me would readily come to the same conclusion.
Well, that motherfucker
Therefore,
shaking like a dog is.
Although it pains me to do so, because of the respect I have for the legislative branch of government.
He is shaking.
Check this out.
He's
I'm
in
going to show
fear.
you how I afforded this car.
Good. He needs to be in fear.
Okay, you ready? All right, $118 for car insurance. That's how much I was paying. Okay,
And my decades-long record of cooperating with Congress, under the advice of my attorneys, I will invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution to refrain from answering your questions. Thank you.
We will now begin a round of questioning. Dr. Fauci, your testimony today is compelled by a lawful subpoena. As you know, it's a crime under 18 U.S.C. Section 1001 to knowingly make a material false statement to Congress, with a penalty up to 5 years of imprisonment. Understanding that you are under oath, the American people would like to understand your reasoning, your rationale for why you chose to fund the research in Wuhan. There have been, intelligence agencies, the CIA, the FBI, the DOE, have all come to the conclusion that more likely than not, the virus came from the lab in Wuhan. And so we'd like to know, what was the rationale? What was the discussion? How, what went behind the decision to fund the research in Wuhan? How did you come to the conclusion that a totalitarian country would be capable of doing this in a BSL-2 lab, a lab that lacked the security? What was the reasoning? And are you sorry, basically, for making the decision? Would you, given another chance, say, well, gosh, circumstances now, as I know it, maybe it wasn't a wise thing. Can you explain to the committee why you chose to fund this dangerous research in China?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
In the red folder on your table is a copy of Section 192 of Title II of the U.S. Code. Your counsel has been provided a copy as well. That section makes it a crime for a witness appearing under subpoena to refuse to answer any questions pertinent to the question under inquiry. Do you have that in front of you?
They're going, yeah, I
On
think
the
you're right,
advice
Tim.
of
They're
counsel,
leading
I
him down the
respectfully
road right now.
decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Let the record record that the witness has refused to answer whether there's a folder in front of him based on his Fifth Amendment right. It is true that you're appearing under direction of our subpoena to provide testimony on matters under consideration by the committee, including the origins of COVID-19, risky life sciences research, and your tenure as a federal government employee. Additionally, you've been provided a full and unconditional pardon dated January 19th, 2025, for any offenses against the United States which may have been committed or taken part from January 1st, 2014 through the date of the pardon for a 10-year period, arising from or in any manner related to your service as director of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, as a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, or the White House COVID-19 response team, or as chief medical advisor to the president. Have you refused this pardon, or do you have any reason to believe this full and unconditional pardon, this grant of immunity, would somehow require you to plead the Fifth Amendment?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Based on the facts presented, I'm going to direct you to
don't know.
answer the questions. The committee has issued a valid subpoena. They have requested your presence here. The questions are very pertinent to your decision-making as head of NIAID, as well as a chief advisor to the president. Do you still refuse to answer the questions?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Let's do the. Dr. Fauci, were you ever made aware of gain-of-function research on monkeypox being conducted at the National Biodefense Analysis and Countermeasure Center, NBAC, at Fort Detrick?
On the advice
This
of
dude with
counsel,
the
I
earpiece
respectfully
in right here. He must be some type of security or something.
decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Dr. Fauci, did the CIA ever transfer funds to NIH under an interagency agreement?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
Oh, he knows he
Dr.
did
Fauci,
something
did the
wrong,
NIH
BB. That's why he's pleading the Fifth. He knows he did something wrong.
ever conduct research for or in coordination with any element of the intelligence community, CIA, ODNI?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
The reason why these questions are important is, President Trump has done a ban, and we're glad that he did a ban on gain-of-function research. So we're better off than we were when we had an advocate serving as head of NIAID, an advocate for gain-of-function research. There is still, though, a question, though, whether or not the intelligence community is adhering to that order. There's a question of whether or not gain-of-function research is still ongoing. And these are important questions the American people deserve to know. Dr. Fauci, have you been read into any classified Department of Homeland Security program, any prospective special access program concerning gain-of-function research?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
When we look at the research in China, the gain-of-function research that you've denied was gain-of-function, one of the things that startled the scientists when they saw COVID in the first couple of weeks was when they looked at the sequence of it, they said, oh my God, there's a furin cleavage site in it.
Sick of paying for hours you aren't even sure your team actually worked? See this little sticker tag from Connect Team? It's gonna save you 10.
And in this particular family of coronaviruses, the Sarbeco viruses, they'd never seen this before. They were also startled to look at it and see how it was coded for, what the codons were, and to discover that the codons used
You're
out of
probably
36
right,
different.
Kevin. But he's ruined. From here on out, he's ruined. His legacy is ruined. He'll never be respected again in the scientific community. And that right there will haunt him. He's got too much pride, man.
Possibilities turned out to be the one that was commonly used in gene manipulation by scientists. Dr. Fauci, were the scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology capable of inserting a furin cleavage site into a coronavirus?
You think so, Pimp? I think
the
your
advice
first,
of
I think your first observer, however you say it, was probably right. He'll probably end up gone.
Counsel, I respectfully decline
Maybe
to
not by
answer
his own,
based upon
you know what
my
I mean?
rights
He'll be
under the
had
Fifth.
like wounds to the back, but he'll be did it himself, if you understand what I'm saying.
Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
So one of the experiments that was pretty common was they would take the backbone of a SARS virus, and this would be a SARS virus that the backbone itself wasn't that dangerous, but then they would dig through guano, 300 feet underground, bat guano. They'd find other viruses, unknown viruses. They'd take the S protein off of an unknown virus and stick it on a backbone. And then they would infect mice that have humanized cells. And they were trying to discover if they could create a virus that infects humans. Now, many people would say, well, gosh, that doesn't sound like a really good idea to create viruses that don't exist in nature to see if they'll infect human cells. What if one escaped? What if you keep infecting this and do serial passage? You actually adapt the virus to be infectious to humans. So the question is whether or not Dr. Fauci, the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Why would you want to create a fucking virus that would attack a human host? That's really the question. Do you know how kind of a mad scientist type shit you'd have to be to create a fucking virus that didn't exist? For what? What's the purpose in it?
Was combining an S protein with one virus with the backbone of others. And could this lead to a virus? Maybe it wasn't even predicted, but could it lead to viruses that gained in function and then could lead to a pandemic?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
One of the arguments that you and others have made against this virus coming from the lab is it couldn't have come from the viruses that have been published. And nobody's really arguing that. I think from the very beginning, people acknowledged that the viruses that have been published are too far evolutionarily distant from a virus that could have become COVID-19. But what has never been acknowledged by the side who tries to call the other side of conspiracy theory, which is really something you don't usually see in a scientific debate. This is the first time I've ever seen an article printed in Lancet by your friends who called this a conspiracy theory. You know, these are the kind of things you see as a screed on a political, website. You don't really see this in science. But when they release this as being a conspiracy theory, we're wondering that when you do this, when you combine these viruses and are able to grow them in humanized cells, whether or not this kind of risky research, whether you call it gain of function or not, whether you use the definition of gain of function, whether this kind of research should have had more scrutiny. I think in your House testimony, you testified that you never traveled to China and that you were unaware that anybody at NIH ever examined the labs, that you trusted the Chinese scientists. I think you said that even recently, that with your discretion, you trusted the Chinese scientists. The problem is that even in our country, we trust our scientists. They're good American scientists, probably doing the right thing for America. But at the same time, we oversight to make sure it's not dangerous research, but we also investigate the lab. I believe Fort Detrick was one of our main labs was closed down in the last year or two because of, research institute, a research incident that was dangerous with dangerous pathogens. And so the American people would want to know, How could you approve this dangerous research in China, say that you trusted the Chinese scientists, and then in the end, you had to admit that you'd never been there and none of your inspectors had ever been there? Dr. Fauci, had any of the labs where this dangerous research was occurring, were any American lab oversight or lab investigators, did they ever appear in these labs to make sure that they were safe labs?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
What's up, little man?
So one of the main theories for those who have looked at this being created in the lab was the idea that could have come from a virus not previously published. Dr. Fauci, are you aware that Dr. Shi, who worked for the Wuhan Institute of Virology, was said to, and I think in her own words, to have over 100 viruses that had not been previously published that could have been a close enough relative to create COVID-19? Are you aware of that?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Under your testimony previously, when you denied ever having funded gain of function in China, it was so adamant as to be striking, to leave no room for any interpretation of what is or isn't gain of function research. But there's another important question. Did you fund gain of function research in other biolabs around the world?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights.
We were classmates at school. Buying a mattress was the worst. So we built a better one. We all had the same bad mattress buying story. Every mattress we bought was wrong.
Under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
The one research project that we do know you did fund is the one that Ron Fauci did. And it's important to talk about because this sort of was the beginning of the debate over gain of function. And this wasn't just me. I wasn't even aware of the debate 10 years ago. This was other scientists, over 200 scientists at the Cambridge Working Group signed a protest because they didn't think you should fund the research and they didn't think it should even be published because it was sort of a roadmap as to how to make a bioweapon. So what they did was the avian flu, and this is important. It may be the most important question we get to here today. The avian flu has about 50% mortality for humans. The good news, though, about animal viruses is they don't infect humans very well. It will infect.
I'm trying to find the whole fucking diary inquiry release so we can watch it from start to finish.
Humans, but doesn't go human to human very well. Ron Fauci, with the money that you provided to him, did an experiment where he caused purposeful mutations to create a new virus, an avian flu that didn't just infect birds well, but actually infected mammals well, went ferret to ferret in an aerosolized manner. People saw this and were aghast, at the decision-making process that you decided to fund this. But this is when, the debate came about and you wrote in support of this in the Washington Post, and you said, even if a scientist is bitten, even if a pandemic should occur, the knowledge is worth the risks. Do you still stand by that? Would you like to qualify at all whether or not the knowledge of gain of function?
Let's see what they released on Fox. I know it's not going to be all of it, but.
As he is heading to Michigan today, the president is expected to tout his economic policies in that key battleground state. And of course, today, 99 days to go before the midterm elections. This is an important hinge point for messaging and policies. And also, we're just a few days away from some more high stakes primaries. So we're watching all of it for you. In Seattle, a manhunt is underway. After a deadly shooting that happened last night, police say 3 people were killed, 4 others injured, including a 2-year-old little child, when 2 suspects opened fire at each other at a crowded food festival underneath the Space Needle. Well, they hit everybody else. 1 suspect is in custody. The second remains at large. Authorities say there is no threat to the public that they can determine at this point. We'll bring you any new details as we get them. And this Fox News alert, Dr. Anthony Fauci is now expected to be on Capitol Hill on Wednesday. He will be given sworn testimony on the COVID pandemic. A lot of questions looming still all these years later. This comes as newly released diary entries show Fauci became obsessed with his own fame, even as COVID deaths were soaring throughout the United States. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-host Emily Campagno. And joining us today, Cheryl Casoni, Fox business anchor and host of American Dream Home on Fox Business. Kaylee McGee-White, Fox News contributor. And Paul Murrow, attorney, retired NYPD inspector, Fox News contributor, and host of the
That's
weekly
one
rap
ugly
sheet on Fox
motherfucker,
Nation.
ain't
Senator Rand Paul has released Anthony Fauci's diary entries, and they appear to show a man more focused on his own stardom than tackling the global pandemic that was killing people. One entry from May 2020 reads this way. Big front page article about me appeared in the Washington Post. Very flattering. The situation with my national and international fame is explosive and really unimaginable. It is not hyperbolic to say that today I am the most famous and talked about person in the country. I'm one of the most recognizable persons in the world. Countless profiles on me. I cannot even read all the things that were written about me since I am so busy. Literally. All of that's a quote. By that point, nearly 100,000 Americans had already died from COVID. Now look here. These are just a few clippings taken from the doctor's diary. Donuts with his face on them, his own bobblehead, the Fauci pouchies, and a collage of first responders wearing shirts with his name on them. Fauci was bragging in his diary about his role getting lockdowns implemented. Here's what he wrote, quote, I spoke with Bill de Blasio, that was the mayor of New York at the time, as you may know, and convinced him based on what I was saying publicly and my conversation tonight to close the NYC schools, he had already decided based on what I was saying on TV. I had a similar call with Ann O'Leary, the chief of staff of Governor Gavin Newsom's office, and said based on my TV appearances, the governor has decided to close the schools in California as well as the bars and restaurants. That's different than what I told the Hill in 2022.
I wonder if you would recommend locking down schools if you had to do it all over again.
Well, you know, again, it's first of all, I didn't recommend locking anything down. You're asking me questions. You're talking about the CDC is the public health agency that uses their epidemiologists and their science-based approach to make recommendations.
What about my rights?
But he said they made those decisions based on what he said on TV. Fauci's obsession with his own fame seems even starker when put into numbers. The phrases peer review, meta-analysis, risk-benefit, learning loss, and mental health appear a grand total of 0 times in the diary entries. Meanwhile, award, 80 mentions. Hero, 49 times. Instagram, 36 times. Selfie, 19 times. And there were 641 entries headed with the word press.
Jesus Christ, man.
So I would argue that we shouldn't be distracted by what is undeniably a very unbecoming profile of this guy emerging, right? There's a little bit here of the high school nerd that all of a sudden is the homecoming king, you know, so he was having his big moment in the sun. I get that, but that isn't really the issue. A couple of issues I would argue here are really more important. Number one, we can't make the same mistakes again. So the idea that we lost an entire generation who didn't get socialized through school and now are not prepared for the real world because they lived their lives in their bedroom staring at a computer screen, terrified of opening a window, that's something we can't repeat. But I think most importantly is the following. We still don't definitively have an answer where the thing came from. Now, there were 3 places in the world that did this gain of function kind of research. One of them happened to be Wuhan. And yet we managed to get gaslighted by the PRC, People's Republic of China, saying we had nothing to do with this. This is propaganda, anti-Chinese propaganda. In my estimation, there's no denying that China leashed this thing upon the world. I'm not saying that they did it cognizantly, but it almost certainly came from there. And if that had been America, can you imagine the blowback we'd be paying for Europe's healthcare for the next 200 years? Everybody wants to talk about the ICC these days. How many hundreds of thousands of people died because of this thing? And China caught no flack. If there's one person on earth that we can get in front of the Senate who can shed some light on this, it's this guy. That's the issue. Did we pay for it? And did it come from China? To me, that's what I want to know.
And should we trust, Emily, that he would tell the truth about that now that we know that what he was really focusing on was not what you just talked about?
I mean, part of what we have on our side are the sort of astoundingly honest receipts in his diary. I frankly was, I guess I should be grateful for his honesty, but I'm so shocked that a physician of such stature or experience was so blatantly self-obsessed and so blatantly joy riding and joy surfing on that media coverage of him. What stood out to me, 2 things. Number one, the stark contrast between him when he would record the death toll of that day and then in the same page go on to talk about the press coverage that he had enjoyed that day. I was so shocked. Being surrounded by incredible men and women of science and medicine around us, and particularly there at the AFIP and the CDC and the like, to have one to reveal the curtains that they're just someone.
You know, social media has fucked everybody up. I don't fucking get it, man. I really don't. Social media is the devil. It really is. Or the need to be famous on social media, I should say.
on their own fame. To me, it is such a disservice to all of those men and women in uniform who actually do it for the love of science and their fellow man. And then secondly, he said in his diaries, he talked about that the lab actually amplified, the lab leak amplified all of the entire epidemic rather than during that time, which was covered by the media, by the way, saying that it was sort of an after effect or just happened to occur there in Wuhan. So I think, yes, we will get those answers because we have the black and white writing that he shared in the diary about it. But you're absolutely right. What I don't want to see is the Hill starting to obsess over what is clearly just a shameful persona, and they need to focus on those answers. And also, we need to take this as a lesson for the media worship factor. The people that put him on the cover of Vanity Fair and InStyle and all of those things, guys, there's no way in heck that we should ever worship another human like that again, especially under the circumstances with hundreds of thousands of people dying.
That's such a great point because everybody else also had the purview. I mean, just all of us as citizens to turn this off. Like to turn him off, not to pay attention to that side of him that just kept him in front of the cameras with no useful information.
I got her sped up, Kevin.
Remember the day that he had to admit, well, maybe not cloth masks. Maybe not. They don't wear them in surgery. Like, what do you, it took you weeks, months to tell us maybe not cloth masks?
Totally. I was not surprised by the diary reveal when it came out because back in 2020, when I was in this building covering COVID and the thousands upon thousands of people that were dying every day, I had many sources in the medical community voice their frustration with Dr. Anthony Fauci as this was all unfolding in real time. And what they told me is basically, Paul, to your point, funny, not funny. Here's somebody, no one knew who he was. He was shielded in an office. He never got any attention. He was never part of any meetings. I mean, he really was just kind of this silent figure. And then this became the guy's Super Bowl. And I hate to say that because of what was unleashed on our nation, because of his miscalculations and again, his ego. But I was told about that from doctors. They were very frustrated by some of the advice he was giving. And they were vehement telling me that they disagreed with the masks. Absolutely. But many of the
pushed together like fucking cattle. Look, I'm no goddamn doctor, but I was even looking around. I even told my wife, I said, well, fuck, if this shit is supposed to be social distancing, they're doing everything but social distancing. They're pushing everybody together and forcing them to go in two fucking lines, like at school cafeteria. I was like, yeah, this shit's gonna spread like nobody's fucking business. Y'all remember that shit going through Walmart, one fucking door in and one door out, two lines fucking open. Instead of letting everybody spread out, they congested everybody together. And shit was wild, man. It was very well mishandled for sure.
The things that he said. This is what's going to make Wednesday so interesting when this hearing comes on. Because remember, Senator Paul is bringing him in because he's accusing him of lying to Congress. It goes back to the Wuhan lab, goes back to gain of function funding, all of that. But there's text messages that have been revealed, and I can't wait to hear, well, whether he answers the questions or not, we'll see. But how's Fauci going to respond to black and white text messages showing him putting pressure on other scientists to follow his narrative? That goes back to the ego that you're talking about, Emily. That is this man. And look, he's lawyered up. We know he's lawyered up. And by the way,
pushed everybody together. You would think it would be total opposite, right? They could have done so many different things, man. They could have done shopping by last name, right? Alphabetical order. People with A, you come on this day. People, and so on and so on. And it just would have done better. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, no, shit. Unc was hitting them up. Yeah. Unc knew where to get toilet paper. I stole all the toilet paper out of all the porta potties. They wasn't using them anyway. Nobody was working. I was like, shit, let me get that toilet paper.
Hey, just to add this for Wednesday, he already got that big old pardon from departing Joe Biden, whether it was Joe Biden or the auto pen. I don't know.
It got so bad, people were fucking buying up paper towels.
Signed it, but he's got an all-encompassing pardon. So whether or not he's forthcoming, I don't know. But there's a lot of questions, and it's infuriating what has happened to our nation because of him.
Well, I agree with everything that Paul and Emily were saying about the ego. However, I do think that the shameful persona is important because the cherry on top of all of this is that the American taxpayers were funding it. Keep in mind that while this was happening, Anthony Fauci was the highest paid, quote-unquote, public servant in the federal government. He was making more than $450,000 a year to pose for magazine-style photo shoots, to have dinner with Jake Tapper, and to solicit for his own highly paid awards. There was one nugget in these diary entries that I found very revealing, which showed him soliciting various scientists to nominate him for these highly paid awards. There was one in particular where he emailed Barton Haynes at Duke University to nominate him for the Dan Davis Prize. He ended up winning that, including the $1 million prize money attached to it. Now, none of you are going to be surprised to learn that Barton Haynes at Duke has received more than $1.2 billion in research funding from Fauci's own agency. That is corruption, pure and simple, and the American taxpayers were paying for it. The other thing that I will say is the other most shocking thing about these diary entries, and the reason why they are so important, is that because it reveals the cavalier attitude with which he treated the consequences of his own recommendations and his own policies. There was another entry where President Trump actually ripped into Fauci and Deborah Birx, accusing them of deceiving him and of deceiving the nation. And Fauci wrote in his diary, quote, "I encouraged her that we are okay, and at the end of the day, she and I will be loved by the people we care about." Who were the people that he cared about? Were they the tens of millions of children who were deprived of any social experience, who have been robbed of academic achievement? Was it the tens of thousands of elderly people who were forced to die alone because their relatives weren't allowed to physically be present with them? Was it the tens of thousands of Americans who were censored online for rightly pointing out that Fauci was wrong about just about everything that he said?
Dude,
No, the only people that Fauci cared about
I seen
were
a
the people.
video on here of a grandmother looking at her grandkids through the glass, right, of her home, and she was just in tears. It was tearing her the fuck up. And I know that shit bothered me when I seen that.
People waving their little Fauci bobbleheads. And most of all, the only person that he actually cared about was himself. There has to be accountability. It's not enough to say that he was a malignant narcissist, even though he was. He is an evil person, probably one of the most to have a position of influence in this country.
I nominate you to take a seat at the hearing. That's right. Have a guest portion. You should be in it.
No doubt.
That's exactly right. And the money. And remember, he was still being paid for years after.
Businesses went
because he
under.
got paid after his position ended.
People's livelihoods were affected. Businesses went under. Lots of shit, man, due to that dude's decision making and him. He was on TV every fucking day, it seemed like, telling people what to do and giving out mandates. And people didn't know what to do. They were listening to him. And he knew they were listening to him. That's why he was on fucking TV. And now he's going to plead the fifth and not even answer any questions. Yeah, it says a lot about who he is. And I think you're right, Pimp. I think they're going to fuck him up over this shit. And they should. They rightfully should.
Well, he's getting paid now. You ever see his pension is in the six figures.
Well, it's at $450 a year times however many. All right, we'll move on. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox.
I was hoping that we'd find
is worth the
more of that
risks,
footage
particularly in this
of-
case, since
of
we
the
now
diary.
know 15 million people
I'm going to
died
have to do some more research on that shit.
worldwide. Many people believe this came from the lab. Do you think that the risks really are worth the benefits for gain of function research?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah. All right. We're going to finish with this question. And it's based really on that statement, that general statement and your support for gain of function. The idea that the benefits outweigh the risks. So there are many other people who disagree. They aren't politicians or not. I don't know what party they're in. David Relman is probably one of the most esteemed. And he is a scientist at Stanford. He, I think, has classified clearance. He's been a consultant to our government probably for a decade or more. And he's written about this publicly. He says the opposite. He said that the risks of this research do not outweigh the benefits. He said the risks, we shouldn't do it. Richard Ebright, who's been involved in this debate for 2 decades, says the same thing. Says we really shouldn't be doing this at all. There's a quote also by the Kevin Esfelt quote. Is that at the very end? Kevin Esfelt, who's a CRISPR scientist at MIT, also wrote about this game.
Oh, let's see what old Bernie's got to say to him.
About your opening statement, Mr. Chairman. I think it was dead on. Very, very well done. Mr. Fauci, do you know who David Schertler is?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. What does the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution say?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
No, I'm just asking you what it says.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
I'm going to give the Constitution to my aide. He'll bring it over to you so you can have it for future reference. I think it's something that every American should know what the Constitution says. Do you know who wrote the Fifth Amendment?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
So you're invoking a right that you don't know who wrote it or what it says. Is that correct?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Wow. All right, let me tell you who David Schertler is for the audience because he was ejected by the chairman. He's a high-profile criminal attorney. He's represented some really great people, like Senator Bob Menendez. Maybe that's somebody who my Democrat colleagues may remember took gold bars as bribes from the Egyptians. And there's an article here in the Washington Free Beacon that talks about why you would hire a guy like David Schertler. And the comment is, if you're in deep shit, that's who you call. Do you feel like you're in deep shit?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
That's what I heard one of them say.
Clearly,
Thanks. How you doing, sir?
What you think today is that somehow you're above reproach. Somehow you feel like you don't need to be treated like a normal American. Can you do me a favor in the audience and stand up if during the time of the COVID pandemic, you were called a racist for calling the virus a Wuhan virus or the China virus? If you thought the 6-foot rule was total crap, if you thought the vaccine wasn't something that you should take, if you thought it was outrageous the way the mask policy was rolled out, if you were fired from your job for not taking that vaccine, including members of the military, if you thought closing schools was catastrophically stupid, and that you thought that during these times saying these things made you somehow a lesser human being. Dr. Fauci, can you just turn around and look at the people behind you? You're not willing to do that? That's not a question. It's not a question. To your lawyers, not a question. It's a request. All you have to do is look up from your lawyers and look at the people who were absolutely shamed for saying what we know now to be the truth. You can't even look at them? That's a question. Are you able to look at them? You can sit down in the audience. There was a
What's so funny? It's hard to explain.
Is it hard to explain? Because, well, her nieces are following fake trends. Anna's going to get her thrills with real money games on Hard Rock Bet.
New customers deposit $10 and get $100 in games bonus. Powered by Pass Motor Racing.
Now this, yesterday, Dr. Anthony Fauci invoked the Fifth Amendment 4,001,001 times, according to Top Pyro, but it's actually 111 times, certainly high enough at a Senate hearing on COVID. Here's a quick highlight reel, if you want to call it that.
Did you fund gain-of-function research in other biolabs around the world?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer. I respectfully decline to answer. I respectfully decline to answer. I respectfully decline to answer.
What color tie are you wearing?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer.
I know what color it was. Senator Rand Paul himself joins me now. Senator, great to have you here. You want to hold Fauci in contempt for this. You're going to need 60 votes to pass the resolution in the Senate. Do you have the votes?
Well, first step is to pass it out of committee, and I think we do have the votes to pass it out of committee. I think there are two different approaches we can take after that. I think we can try for a vote on the floor, which may not pass, or I can send the referral directly to the Department of Justice. Nothing prevents me from doing that. I have in the past individually sent a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. It's simply a recommendation. It's not a law. So there is no mandate that I have to go to the Senate floor on it. And in all likelihood, we will pass it out of committee, send it directly there with a legal brief pointing out the reasons why we think he is in contempt. There is a legal question whether or not if you have a pardon, you can still plead the fifth. And that is the question the Department of Justice will have to determine and whether or not to file contempt charges.
You also kicked out Fauci's lawyer, did you not, out of the hearing? Explain that situation.
You know, I think his behavior was unbecoming. I think he wouldn't have done it in a courtroom. I think a judge would have put him in jail for contempt for that kind of behavior. He was told not to speak. He was not a presenter. He was supposed to be sitting in the first row, and he was allowed to give advice. We gave wide latitude. He had 6 lawyers there. We said, you can talk to them and consult anytime you wish, but you're not to speak. You're not testifying. And the reason you don't want him to testify is Fauci's taking the fifth and not saying anything, but he can't say anything positive or negative. And then if you let his lawyer give his positive statements on why, oh, these are the answers to the questions, but my guy's not going to answer, that's not taking the fifth. That's getting around the fifth and letting your lawyer testify. So it was a trick they tried to pull on us, but they didn't observe the rules. And I gave him 3 or 4 chances before having him escorted by security. And I hope that the bar will look into his behavior and ask the question whether that's becoming of the lawyer.
Well, he says you're obsessed with him and you're just trying to intimidate him. How do you respond to that?
1 million Americans died. 15 million people may have died worldwide. This is not an obsession with him. It's an obsession what caused this. I will say that the question of whether or not we should take taxpayer money and fund research that changes an animal virus into a human virus, I think is a death wish. I think it's akin to nuclear weapons. I think it needs to be discussed. And I have legislation that I have put forward that, if passed, would have a presidential commission of scientists to oversee this, to make sure it never happened.
Right.
But to make sure it never happened, you have to have the architect of it, the guy who supports this, has to ultimately come clean and say it was a mistake. And he's yet to do that.
Yeah.
And he ain't going to do that.
If I were to talk to someone who is looking to implement NetSuite, I would say you would never regret it. It truly has revolutionized our business. It's changed how we think. It's changed how we build processes. And I ultimately think it's the best decision we've ever done for our operations.
Gain of function. I implore every scientist, funder, and nation working in the field, please stop. No more trying to discover or make pandemic-capable viruses. No more experiments likely to disseminate blueprints for plagues. Dr. Fauci, would you like to at least
Nikki,
answer this one question for us today?
Oh, you're all
and
right.
let us know whether or not you've changed your mind on whether or not the benefits
I just appreciate you being here now.
of gain-of-function research outweigh the risks.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Anybody that had this kind of power should not be allowed to just sit there and keep pleading the fifth. He should be forced to answer these questions for sure.
The chairman has denied your assertion of privilege and directed you to answer, but you nonetheless refuse and stand on privilege despite the existence of the pardon. The committee will have to consider after this hearing what appropriate action should be taken against you for the failure to testify after being directed to do so. It's against the law to obstruct an investigation of Congress. There will be repercussions to your refusal to testify today. Senator Peters. You're not recognized. You're not recognized. If you are unruly, you will be removed from the proceeding. You are not recognized, and you are not recognized, sir. Sir, you are not recognized. You are not recognized. Security, we'll hold off, but you will respect these proceedings. You were told not to sit at the table. You insist on sitting at the table, and we told you would not be recognized. You are not invited here for testimony, sir. You are being disruptive. Would you behave this way in a courtroom? No, because the judge would put you in jail. I can't do that today, but I can have you escorted from the premises. So I would say, sir, sit quietly and don't say another word. I said, sit quietly. You are not recognized. Another word and you're gone.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear what the attorney has to say.
He is not recognized by the committee or the chair. If he speaks again, he will be removed from the room. This testimony is from Anthony Fauci. This is not a game with his lawyers. He can advise, his lawyers can give him advice. He's got a half dozen here. They're all allowed to talk to him.
Yes.
All right. But the attorneys are not recognized. In fact, the attorney was told not to sit at the
I
table.
don't know why
and he's
he would
not
have,
obeying that record.
why he would have immunity. The thing about it is why do you show up with 6 lawyers if you don't have anything to hide?
Recommendation. There's a row behind you, sir. That's where you were told to sit, and you're not. And now you're disrupting the proceedings. And so, look, this is the way Anthony Fauci wants to be remembered. For a lawyer not listening to the rules. That's the way you want to be remembered, and that's what you're going to do. You are not recognized, sir. Security, please remove him from the room.
That right there speaks volumes. All of them clapping to start with.
I just go into your.
Let the record state that Dr. Fauci will still have the advice of the other half a dozen attorneys that he brought along today. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The COVID-19 pandemic is not the first or the last public health crisis to impact our nation. In December 2022, I released a report that identified significant failures in our federal government's preparedness and initial response to COVID-19. This report contained 17 key findings. It's a very large report, which I have right here. It contains 17 key findings and corresponding recommendations, including the need to invest in sustainable domestic manufacturing capabilities for critical medical supplies, build the infrastructure needed to surge testing capacity for infectious diseases, and robustly fund public health emergency preparedness and responses across all levels of government. Unfortunately, multiple administrations, including the current Trump administration, have failed to fund or to reform our health preparedness. This is something that I would hope the committee in the future would investigate. It needs to be taken a look at. It also feels like a new public health threat is hitting us every month. There's a foodborne parasite affecting thousands of people in Michigan and across the country, and our federal agencies still haven't fully pinned down the source of that outbreak. Measles cases in this country are at the highest they've been in 35 years. More children are getting sick and even hospitalized from this preventable disease. Over 1,000 people have died from the Ebola virus in Africa, and we don't know how widespread this crisis actually is. We have a hantavirus scare on a cruise ship, and though it hasn't made headlines in the way that the screwworm threatening our food security has, I remain concerned about bird flu that is also spreading and could one day cause a pandemic. This is also something this committee should be investigating and holding hearings on. Since January 2025, the Trump administration has taken a number of actions to drastically weaken our ability to fight infectious diseases and biological threats that endanger Americans. These actions are both incomprehensible and are also inexcusable. They include slashing funding for public health and infectious disease research, canceling contracts for cutting-edge vaccine technology, shutting agencies responsible for tackling infectious diseases around the world, firing thousands of federal employees with keeping our communities and our medicines and our food supply safe, and injecting political appointees in what should be non-political grant-making functions. That is something this committee should be looking at. I could go on. I could go on all the topics that we need to be looking at moving forward to protect this country. We're not doing that in this committee. That's what this committee was designed to do. It's what it has done throughout history. It has done it in a bipartisan way. We should get back to that and think about the future of this country and keeping this country safe. When a crisis like COVID-19 strikes, we have an obligation to examine what went right and what went wrong to provide accountability for the American people. Congress certainly has done that. Between the House and Senate, nearly 20 different committees, including this committee, as I mentioned, have conducted oversight of the COVID-19 pandemic, conducting transcribed interviews, holding dozens of hearings, and released more than 10 reports. Today's exercise, unfortunately, is a stark departure from those largely bipartisan, legitimate efforts. The chairman has shut the minority out of participating equally in these efforts, withheld information, selectively released documents, actions that completely undermine the credibility of this investigation. I will enter a record without objection, Mr. Chairman, a letter that I sent to you that detailed all of those areas that we have concern with and where we were shut out.
Without objection.
We'll provide other details as well. I think today's hearing, unfortunately, does real damage. It's tempting to turn one person into the scapegoat for a crisis that hundreds of officials across both the Trump and the Biden administration were responsible for handling. And it does so in a way that people that are facing death threats.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44, a complete AI creation platform. Describe what you want. And
this is only going to, unfortunately, deter other scientific experts from public service to understand that this is what they would have to go through as they provide their advice to us. We're not going to make our nation safer, and I hope that we can restore by doing these kinds of activities. And I hope that we can restore our legitimate bipartisan oversight that's going to help strengthen our public health and pandemic preparedness and other homeland priorities. That's what this committee needs to focus on. It hasn't the last year and a half. Let's hope it does in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Fauci, I hope the American people listen very carefully to Chairman Paul's opening statement. I think it's a stunning indictment of the actions you've taken that have been so destructive to global health. I certainly understand why you needed a pardon. I certainly understand why, on the advice of counsel, you're not answering any questions, because I think it'd be almost impossible for you to answer the questions truthfully without really demonstrating what you did, your culpability, self-incriminating. We have, all of us, has prepared a lot. I've been deluged with questions to ask Dr. Anthony Fauci. There are so many legitimate questions that deserve answers, and now you're not willing to provide those answers. So with my limited time, I'm going to talk about things that my investigation have revealed that have not been adequately answered, and quite honestly, haven't been adequately covered by the legacy media. I'll kind of combine the questions into kind of one, but I certainly, let's put up the last COVID chart. I was warned pretty early on about the dangers of the experimental gene therapy that you've called a vaccine, but it really falls under the definition of gene therapy. So I was going to ask you, were you carefully monitoring the safety surveillance systems like VAERS and vSafe that literally were deluged with complaints? Currently, worldwide, there have been almost 1.7 million adverse events reported to the VAERS system. Of those, over 39,000 were deaths. And of those deaths, 24% occur on the day of vaccination within 1 or 2 days. 24%, which, by the way, just happens to be the same percentage that a Rasmussen poll pointed out. The American public believe 24% of the American public believe they know somebody who died of the experimental gene therapy. So again, I was certainly interested in asking you whether or not you were following this as carefully as I was. It's not my responsibility to follow safety surveillance systems, but I did. And by the way, when I published, this is actual government information. When I published it and people had me on their shows, they would be censored by Facebook. They would be deplatformed.
No, I got in trouble for talking about it.
I think largely at the behest of the actions you took to make sure that disinformation wasn't spread. This wasn't disinformation. This was the truth. So I was going to ask you whether you knew Dr. Marks. I think you do know him. He's the head of CBER. He's the man who is in charge of approving vaccines and surveilling for the safety. My investigation shows that on March 1st of 2021, less than 3 months after the emergency use authorizations, he was warned by Dr. Anna Scharsman, data mining expert, that the algorithm they were using to analyze VAERS data was going to hide in mass safety signals. 26 days later and 3 months consecutively after that, they did data runs with a new algorithm that unmasked those safety signals. They showed dozens of safety signals, including sudden cardiac death, cerebral artery occlusion, basal ganglia stroke, agonal rhythm, Bell's palsy, and pulmonary infarction. Your diaries now show that you actually suffered pulmonary infarction in, I think, probably June 2021. I was just wondering whether it ever went through your mind that maybe that injection, all those boosters you took, might have caused that. And the question I was going to, and I'll ask this question, were you ever made aware of the fact that Peter Marks was warned that the algorithm was going to hide the safety signals? And were you told that senior FDA officials were given shown dozens of safety signals associated with the COVID injection?
This is how
I know
my
his
employees
answer.
clock in.
Y'all want to
This
bet
little
on
thing
his
has helped
answer?
my business
I
save
bet he
tens of
pleads the
thousands of
fifth.
dollars. Remember how we used to clock in?
Yeah.
On the advice of counsel, I
told you.
respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Next area I want to go through is
Look at Rich's. Hey, Nikki, look at Rich's. Rich Newbuck's daughter's boyfriend, young, healthy, took the shot, no longer with us, in his early 20s, still a kid, still a fucking kid.
in that same month of March 2021, an employee at NIH, Dr. Nath, led a team of researchers who were diagnosing and treating individuals who'd never had COVID, but were severely injured by the genetic therapy injections. Dr. Nath told those individuals, stay quiet. We want to make sure that we gather all the information and then release it to doctors so they can treat people like yourself. There was a concerted effort, and I'll enter this in the record. It appears inside NIH to quash Dr. Nass publishing that study. It finally was put on a preprint server with telling no one, and I think about May of 2022. I think what's noteworthy about this is Dr. Nath told the injured participants that early treatment, early intervention was crucial for them to be treated. And yet within the NIH, they were questioning what was Dr. Nath doing. They didn't want to publish that because, and I want to take time searching for it, because publishing it would create vaccine hesitancy, which is what we continue to hear time and time again, is the reason they didn't promote they lied about the safety signals they were seeing. Throughout the pandemic, I always push early treatment. We've got things in here where, you were really concerned about remdesivir because it was untested, but hydroxychloroquine, yeah, it was an approved drug, maybe some safety issues, but we had a great deal of experience with it. All of a sudden, you had the Surgisphere study. It was retracted within 2 weeks because it was completely false, totally blew up the use of hydroxychloroquine. And then when it comes to ivermectin, which, by the way, because I was contacted by so many people, I referred them to doctors who actually had the courage and compassion to treat vaccine-injured individuals.
And to get fired from your fucking job because you would not take the vaccination. That to me was.
But I was going to ask you whether you were involved in the FDA attack on ivermectin. You had a interview on CNN on August 29th of 2021, where, again, I just don't want to take time to find the exact quote, but you said there's no evidence that ivermectin is helpful. On that exact same day, and I've got the studies right here. There was a website that was tracking the random controlled studies. Here they are, showing 60, 70% efficacy of ivermectin. The same day you say there's no evidence, there was all kinds of evidence. Loved ones had to go to hospitals, had to sue hospitals. Just, would you try it? So I would want to know, to what extent were you involved in sabotaging hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, and did you do that because you knew the only way you get emergency use authorization for these drugs, these experimental gene therapy, was if there was no effective treatment, you couldn't get the emergency use authorization. So is that why you helped sabotage these cheap generic drugs in favor of remdesivir, which, by the way, nurses, are you aware of the fact that nurses called it run, death is near?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
But let me end on this note, because this just came to light. We've got 11 million pages of documents. We also have other people who were in the room. But now you actually lied to your own diary. On March 27, 2020, you wrote in your diary, "To my surprise yesterday, the POTUS sent a letter to governors outlining a plan to reopen county by county while monitoring the spread of virus in the low-risk counties. This was half-baked and never shown to Deb or I before it was sent out." So we have evidence that, in fact, you were fully aware of it and certainly approved, if not authored it. So I was just simply asking you, is that true? Did you literally lie to your own diary? Did you know of that letter sent out to governors about reopening county by county? Again, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask you to ask the witness to just answer that one simple question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hassan. Thank you. Dr. Fauci, I want to start by thanking you for more than 50 years of service to this country at the National Institutes of Health. And it is unfortunate that you have been put in the position that you are in today. And it must be enormously frustrating to know that this hearing is designed to entrap you. It must be very frustrating for your attorneys to hear the chair's mischaracterization of the legal issues and posture that impact your decisions at the witness table today. Meanwhile, I was going to ask you a series of questions about things that are relevant right now to the people of the United States about the state of public health in this country. Since President Trump took office in 2025, more than 4,500 cases of measles have been reported. That is more cases in the year and a half since Donald Trump has been president than were reported from 2000 to 2024 combined.
Y'all hear this shit?
Children are dying because there has been increased vaccine hesitancy, fueled by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and frankly, his entire administration. Thousands of people in the United States of America have been sickened by a foodborne parasite, and the outbreak is nowhere near under control, as staffing at the
Yeah,
FDA
it's gonna storm
and
here
other
too,
critical
Thunder,
public
Mickey
health
Mouse.
entities has been slashed by Russell Vogt and Elon Musk. Last year, the National Institutes of Health awarded 201 fewer grants compared to the previous years. 207, I am corrected, compared to previous years. As those grants were either canceled or delays, especially at the beginning of the Trump administration, I can tell my colleagues what the impact was on people in New Hampshire, on scientists in New Hampshire, on clinical trials in New Hampshire, where people's cancer treatment was interrupted because Elon Musk and Russell Vogt know better, they say, than the people at NIH about what to fund. And because they did some sort of word search, it seems, for some of the grants, and boy, oh boy, if you were studying rural health in New Hampshire and trying to understand how to better engage people who need health care in rural America, that was off the table.
Well, fuck the
America
healthcare y'all
is
had going
losing
on was
researchers
out.
and scientists to other countries.
You can't make this shit up.
Because researchers and scientists, highly trained, highly qualified, invested in often by the American taxpayer, are finding the hostility from this administration so strong that it interferes with their science, and they want to pursue science wherever that science takes them. I also sit on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. We have had a number of hearings with nominees recently to fill critical spots. One of those nominees is Dr. Erica Schwartz, a brilliant woman, medical degree, biomedical engineering degree. I think she also told us she has a law degree and a master's in public health. She was a 2-star admiral in the United States Navy, an experienced doctor. And yet, when I asked her if she would push back at Secretary Kennedy, if he instructed her to suspend the promotion of the flu vaccine as he did some point in the last few months, there's an email to prove it, she couldn't answer that question. She either could not, would not, or had been bullied into evading a question about whether she, as the director of CDC, would stand up to Secretary Kennedy, the most unqualified Secretary of Health and Human Services this country has ever seen, and more than unqualified, somebody who pursues conspiracy theories, degrades people with disabilities, and continues to promote disproved science. That's the state of healthcare and public health in this
Ain't
country
that what
right now.
Fauci
Not to
did,
mention,
though, promoted unfounded fucking healthcare shit that wasn't. Jesus Christ, man! I gotta skip past this fucking lady.
Well, you were tracking the numbers literally every single day, those affected and those that died from the earliest days. There are a lot of lessons that we've got to learn from this, that we should put into history to be able to determine what happens in the future. How do we respond in the future? How do we deal with something like this again? It was uncharted territory for everyone. But I would tell you, countless families, including my own, watched a loved one die behind glass or through a screen because we couldn't get access to them. Children couldn't get to school. People missed their prom or graduation ceremonies. There were lots of things that happened that dramatically changed the future of the country. The mental health issues that we have continued to deal with from the isolation have been profound. Even something as simple as children that wore masks or around adults wearing masks for all that time are slower in learning language now because they couldn't watch someone's lips moving, and so they're slower in that. Amazingly enough, churches and places of worship were forced to be closed down. There were even churches that met where the pastor preached in the parking lot and the congregants all met in their cars with windows up, and police came and scattered them and said, you can't be here. The simple act of social distancing became an issue. As everyone guessed, what's the right distance to be
no doubt, Tech.
away from someone?
No doubt. To listen to these motherfuckers defend him is crazy. And then they try to blame Trump for it. It's like, what the fuck? Everything is Trump's fault. Everything. My car wouldn't start this morning. That's Trump's fault. Fucking hot water heater didn't work. That's Trump's fault. These people are fucking delusional.
Someone else. Literacy rates have declined. All these things are results.
Nikki,
not to mention the loss of lives and the health experiences that have been out there for many Americans. So there are legitimate questions. I wanted to be able to raise some of those, to be able to walk through some of this, because it has been very, very challenging. As we've gone through some of your notes and your diary and other things that are out there, we're trying to be able to pull bits and pieces of things to be able to learn lessons. On May the 6th, 2020, you wrote at that time, I had a conversation with Robert Redfield, as you know well, was then the director of CDC, about the fact that greater than 1 million children worldwide have missed their measles.
Pimp, you can't even believe what you see anymore. Huh? With fucking AI, you better not believe it. Ain't no telling, man. Huh? All these fucking filters and shit. Shit. Better not believe that shit.
Vaccination because of the shutdown. You stated this is terrible and needs to be addressed, since on that basis alone, there would be far more excess deaths from measles among children than coronavirus deaths among children. I need to bring this up to the TF, the task force. Did you ever have an opportunity to bring up the potential of measles deaths among children and an infection rate going around the world from measles based on the fact that so many children would not get their measles vaccine because of the shutdown?
I'm sorry, Senator, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
Blue for Monday and for Tuesday, gray for Wednesday. Please stop wearing jeans to work because it's about to be 100+ degrees.
That is your right to do. One of the big issues is really coming up is on the lab issue. This was greatly discussed about whether this came from a lab or whether this came from nature. There are obvious issues and differences between the two. To be able to know this, you had a lot of conversation on this. Scientists around the world were in conversation on this. There were different statements that you even made in your private notes and your public notes on it. In January the 26th of 2020, this is before we had our first tragic death of coronavirus in the United States. You wrote, it now appears using epi data that the genomic data, the first infection was in early December and was not connected to the market, which was the big rumor that was out there, is this wet market in China. We know the market was not the source, it was the amplifier. On January the 31st, you wrote about a phone call. You wrote the people on the phone felt the mutations around the furin cleavage site of the spike protein could not have occurred naturally, since it would require an evolutionary jump.
There's more than one ways to look at that, right? Maybe if Biden hadn't let millions of illegals across the borders, measles wouldn't be becoming a problem. And, you know, that's a very good point, because in a lot of these other countries, they're not mandated to take all these vaccinations, I believe. I mean, hell, just look at some of these third world countries. They don't have the health care that America has. So when you, just like in the old days, man, when the settlers came over here, they infected the Indians, and a lot of them people passed because of different viruses and stuff that they carried with them. Their bodies just couldn't handle it.
They found nowhere in bat isolates. They bring up the possibility this could have been deliberately inserted and either accidentally released or deliberately released by a crazy person in the lab, the former being the most likely. February the 1st, same year, 2020. This is again still before our first death. There was not total agreement about the likelihood of deliberate insertion.
That's
Ron
why
said
that's why it's very important for people who come over here to do it the right way, so they can be checked and looked at and monitored to make sure that they don't have all these fucking diseases. That's why that border is very, very important. But you know, when you got some crazy fucking Democratic person that thinks they got all the answers, you can't argue with them, because no matter what you say, you're wrong. And they don't want to work with anybody. They want you to fall underneath what they say and be right all the time, man. This shit's wild.
he was sure that this could occur naturally, and we should not waste our time and divert our effort to pursue this. This is expected of him since he was the original gain of function person with Yoshi. Also, Christian was withdrawn. The rest felt deliberate insertion was possible, and given the fact that Dr. Jingling Shi at the University of Wuhan has been working for years to gain a function in coronaviruses to allow adaptation of the spike protein to bind to the human ACE2 receptor, we could not let this go. That's a remarkable statement for February the 1st of 2020, when there hadn't even been the first death here, but we knew something was moving. You knew well that something was moving. You identified February the 1st before any of us had ever heard of the Wuhan lab. Not only the Wuhan lab in the conversation, but literally the scientist that you named in your own notes, the lead scientist that was there. It's interesting to me on that. And the questions I was going to ask you was just your background and knowledge about the Wuhan lab and Dr. Shi and all the details. I'm aware of where you have been on trying to be able to plead your Fifth Amendment right, which is your right to be able to do. But I also want to be able to find out some facts to be able to help us for the future on this. The Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in May of 2020 put out a classified document that has only been recently unclassified on this, that had this statement: we assess all the necessary conditions for an accidental release of a laboratory modified coronavirus, specifically a coronavirus adapted to recognize human cell receptors, were present at the Chinese Wuhan Institute of Virology in mid to late 2019. Now, the question that I had for you is, this is May the 27th of 2020. This is the report that most people will see is this. I have clearance. I serve on the Intelligence Committee. I've actually read this complete document unredacted. My concern is, were you given the ability to see this document unredacted based on your position? Were you able to see this and to be able to get this information? I could see it, and I know what's here. Everybody else just has their conclusion at the beginning of it, not this. My question to you was going to be, did you have access? Because it's important for the future that people in your position do have access to this kind of information and insight. Is there any way you could answer that question? Were you able to give access to this data?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
You wrote on January the 26th of 2020, we should be allowed to send our CDC epidemiologists to China to work with them so they could see the data firsthand. You also wrote in February 12th, 2020, that you had great concerns about the World Health Organization because they depends greatly on China, and as you stated, often bows to them. This is a really important issue that we've got to resolve for the future.
I'm sorry to hear that, baby.
It's not just our cooperation with Chinese scientists, it's our acknowledgement that China covered up their data, wouldn't allow our scientists to be able to come in. They cleaned up the wet market. They cleaned up the other areas. They wouldn't allow you to get access to all the other scientists who are there, including their health records, what happened to them, or even all the sequencing that they had done in advance. For the future of our research and our cooperation with any scientists around the world, I think it's really important that we resolve, if we're going to fund research and cooperate with you, we've got to have certain things from you. If things go sideways, we've got to have access to all information in all places. You were noting not only that China was affecting the World Health Organization and that China was bending them to their will, and so the World Health Organization was putting out data that you saw, at least at that point, as being from a Chinese perspective, covering up what was going on. But you also noted we weren't able to get access to all this information. We've got to be able to figure this out for the future to be able to make sure that research that is done,
So don't
we have
plan
access
nothing.
to all information. If something goes sideways at some point, which clearly it did at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and that being, as was noted by many people, the only lab in the world that was doing research like this that had a lower standard of actually their security standards there than many other labs around the world, yet they were doing this very dangerous research. What can we gain? And what advice could you give us to say in a future setting, we've got to make sure that we actually get information from people and we can be guaranteed that we're going to get that insight? Yes, sir.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
That
yield back.
fucking hiding is bullshit.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There's
I want to go
people that
back to
deserve
the
to know. You know what I mean?
dark
And hiding
days
is just
of the
cowardly.
coronavirus pandemic, one of the darkest days or times in our history. Hospitals were overflowing. Navy medical ships were docked in the Hudson River. Emergency rooms were forced into unprecedented triaging during the worst week of the pandemic, which happens to have been the last week of President Trump's first term. More than 25,000 Americans died of COVID-19.
He don't care.
Easy to forget those dark days. But for the past 18 months, the Trump administration has been engaged in a campaign to rewrite this history. And today's proceeding, I fear, is part of that effort, one of the darkest days in our Senate's history. The Trump administration has launched a baseless set of smears against vaccines that help pull us out of that public health crisis. Vaccines that are undoubtedly President Trump's greatest accomplishment. It has slashed funding to local public health departments that were on the front lines of the pandemic. And those healthcare workers are heroes. It has disparaged those heroes as woke or wasteful. And it has used a politicized Department of Justice to target the researchers who helped us track and understand the novel virus. Today's hearing is another page in that playbook, sadly, tragically. Dr. Fauci, you spent 5 decades in public service, including nearly 4 decades in leadership at the National Institutes of Health, helping to conquer COVID-19, but also HIV, swine flu, Zika,
You know, I've heard a lot of
Ebola,
people claim
and other
that,
epidemics.
I heard a lot of people claim that he was behind that. And now I don't know if there's anything to that. And I didn't know anything about, you know, that he had worked on it, but they just verified that he did. So I find that kind of strange, but carry on. Carry on.
With real life results saving human lives. Put aside all the flowery rhetoric that we hear in the United States Senate. Dr. Fauci has saved lives, as have public health officials in the United States and throughout the world. And today, we are demeaning and degrading their life-saving service. Republicans are eager to rebrand you as a villain in order to distract from their own failure to protect Americans from soaring healthcare costs. They've been rising astronomically in the last couple of years. And from unsafe food, which has caused cyclospora to spread, and resurgent measles as a result of the anti-vaccine policy. This hearing is the culmination of a years-long crusade, which started more than 6 years ago when Dr. Fauci dared to contradict President Trump. The campaign to vilify you, Dr. Fauci, is just one part of this larger campaign against science and facts, a campaign that has made Americans less safe. It is shameful that in a country like ours, a dedicated public service like Dr. Fauci has experienced persistent threats to his life since the pandemic because of the lies that are told about him. His attorney has been gagged.
His attorney's
thrown
been
out of this
gagged.
hearing room.
Oh, God.
But he has written a letter to the chairman that is an explanation for the reasons why Dr. Fauci is, in fact, invoking his constitutional right. It is a right. And I would ask that this letter from David Schertler and Danny Onato be made a part of the record if there's no
Without
objection.
objection.
His attorney has also issued a statement within the last half hour, I believe, that sets forth, again, the reasons that he is here to help protect his client's rights. And I would ask that that statement be made part of the record as well, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
Let's be very clear. The Fifth Amendment is a right of everyone appearing before an authority like this one. It should be respected. And the reason that Dr. Fauci has invoked it, in the words of his attorney, quote, during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, Dr. Fauci appeared at least a dozen times for congressional hearings in the Senate alone in answer to questions about the very issues on which you purport to seek information. He has been thoroughly transparent and consistent in providing factual information to Congress, and he is deeply familiar with the processes and protocols of sharing information with the legislative branch. And then referring to the chairman, this years-long public crusade against Dr. Fauci makes one thing clear. This is not a serious effort to seek information from Dr. Fauci in a transcribed interview for a valid legislative purpose. You are single-mindedly fixated on Dr. Fauci, seeing Dr. Fauci prosecuted for imaginary crimes, and you are so invested in that outcome that you have created a personal brand around it. Those are the words of his attorney. And he cites as well the statements of the chairman, which indicate a clear intent that the result of this proceeding be a prosecution. Quote, the power of some of us must be used for good, like putting Fauci in jail. That's from December 23, 2025. I want to give him a subpoena and a jail cell.
Let's get some more updates. Fuck this shit.
Also from December.
That dude, we ain't gonna learn nothing about that shit. He ain't gonna let us learn nothing about it. We might as well get some updates on the war while we're here. Details. Trump unleashes on Iran's warplanes. I thought he already took all them out. A war planner.
You still buying heavy and expensive lawnmowers in the AI era? In just 3 minutes, you can quickly clear 100 square meters of weeds. In a single morning, you can
smart
finish
mouth.
a whole week's
There's
worth
quite
of
a few
gardening.
places.
One
Ask
person-
British Bulldog. It'll tell you that shit's not good, man.
can do the work of 5, and you no longer have to wait 6 months for expensive professional labor. Since I bought this portable cordless mower recommended by the German Gardening Engineering Lab, weeding has become the easiest part of my day. It includes...
All right, President Trump making good on his threats to Iran, unleashing a new wave of heavy strikes in response to attacks on American forces in the region, and even stronger strikes could be on the way.
So Peter Ducey is live in front of the White House with the latest. Peter.
And the president was chewing out his war planners with a string of expletives, according to a new report in NBC.
Newbuck is in trouble. Just in. Huge cocaine bust. California cocaine bust. Border agents fined $20 million worth of cocaine. Oh, shit. People going through the DTs tonight, ain't they?
News, who describes him as very frustrated. The Iranians just won't fold. And so now the president has been presented an option by the head of CENTCOM to go big and escalate strikes. According to the Wall Street Journal, the idea behind Admiral Brad Cooper's high-end option is to go beyond the smaller retaliatory airstrikes that have done little to deter Tehran from threatening ships in the Strait of Hormuz and lobbing missiles at American forces in the region by sharply escalating the war, according to people familiar with his thinking. CENTCOM says last night, forces successfully completed a heavy wave of strikes against Iran in response to yesterday's attempted missile attacks on U.S. forces. The strikes aimed to further diminish threats posed by Iran and its proxies to American forces, commercial shipping, and neighboring Gulf countries. And this all really could turn into a much broader world war if this Reuters report is true about China getting ready to sell Iran tens of millions of dollars worth of shoulder-fire missile launchers built to take out helicopters and fighter jets.
President Xi told you that China would not give or sell Iran any weapons. And there's a new report that Iran's about to get 400 rocket launchers from China going through Pakistan to Iran.
Well, that would be surprising. I mean, things like that happen, but that would be surprising. He told me very strongly he wouldn't partake. And he knows I'd be quite disappointed.
And when we asked the president about this last week, he said that it is his opinion Xi and Putin are not helping the Iranians in this war against the U.S. right now, based on chats that he has had with them. But we also know it is the opinion of some others in the administration in very high levels that China and Russia are at the very least enabling.
You can't be right about everything, you know. That's just the world we live in.
Iran right now. Back to you.
Yeah, not hurting. They got rebuilt somehow in between that long pause. And a lot of people believe there was China doing that. Thanks so much, Peter. Appreciate it. And in terms of location logistics, I mean, they were hitting certain rooms in certain facilities in Kuwait where the CIA was. And they thought there's no way that Iran would know where the CIA was located, that our satellite images had to be given by Russia. But it looks like there's a 2-week plan that Admiral Cooper has submitted, 10 to 14 days, intended to degrade Iran's missile and drone capabilities rather than continuing just to do retaliatory strikes. So that might, this plan, one of the plans, it definitely involves the IDF. And if no one has better intelligence about Iran than Mossad and the IDF, and you would think there would be the targeting part of any type of operation would be led by them.
Right,
and you would think that
that motherfucker on that backhoe. Oh, shit.
Obviously, President Trump would have spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu about that. I do think it's interesting because Peter mentioned this NBC report that President Trump is exasperated over his war planners not being on the same page. But you have to take that a little bit with a grain of salt, because this is what advisors do for any commander in chief, which is to present the options. I think maybe what they missed perhaps in the story is the frustration that the president has with trying to stop Iran and the IRGC from lobbing the missiles at our bases, hitting things like you're just talking about, Brian, while you've got these negotiations going on with the spokesperson or the parliament speaker and the foreign minister of Iran, which is going nowhere.
I love this. Look at the bottom of your screen. Admiral Cooper presents Trump with a plan to demolish Iran's missiles in 14 days. I know that many of the leaders in our military are presenting him with different plans, and Admiral Cooper's head of CENTCOM. We asked Trey Yingst about what Jackie Heinrich was asking the president about China receiving or
China giving them 400 Chinese-made shoulder-fired air defense missile launchers to the tune of $60 to $70 million. It's a big purchase if Iran is buying these. And Trey Yinks was telling us that these are used to shoot down planes and choppers, and it just takes one person to man one of these launchers. So that would be a big deal if China were providing these to Iran. And you heard the president say he would be very disappointed. Also, military might require some of the troops in the Middle East to surrender their cell phones because top U.S. commanders for the...
I know, right? I've wondered why he ain't used.
You're not ugly. You just
different things that. I hate this live now from Fox. I don't never. Sometimes it's
high
shit
cortisol.
old.
When cortisol
They
stays
present it
high,
like
your
it's
face
new.
bloats. Your stomach holds on to.
But right now, we have to go out to this. Live speaking there at the White House is President Trump. He's making an announcement about truck drivers and transportation. Let's listen.
I want to thank Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy.
I'll watch that shit there.
All right, President Trump making good on his threats to Iran, unleashing a new wave of heavy strikes in response to attacks on American forces in the region, and even stronger strikes could be on the way.
So Peter Doocy is
From overnight, tensions yet again escalating in the Middle East after a few quiet days, one could argue. President Trump following through in his threats to hit back on Iran, unleashing a wave of heavy strikes in response to attacks on American forces in the region. Rebecca Heinrichs, Hudson Institute Senior Fellow. Rebecca, welcome back to our program here. I want to get your commentary on what's happened over the past 12 hours and your commentary on this Wall Street Journal. The U.S. commander with a 2-week plan to escalate strikes in Iran. It reads that Trump could greenlight Cooper's, head of CENTCOM, option to 10 to 14 days of intensive airstrikes intended to cripple Iran's missile capability, despite warnings that the U.S. is running low on air defensive munitions. Or he could opt for more limited military strikes in the hopes that diplomacy could be pursued. It's option 1 or it's option 2. What's your best guess?
Well, both obviously carry risks. I think that option 1 is going to give us the most likely positive outcome for the United States. And Admiral Cooper has had this list of targets now for a while. These targets would include, obviously, IRGC command centers. And we actually saw the United States hit some of those actually last night. But I think what he's talking about here is increasing the number of targets, increasing the tempo of strikes. One thing about the munitions, although I am very sensitive to this concern about getting low on munitions, the kinds of munitions we're actually lower on are the more exquisite, longer range strike systems that we used in the beginning of the war to take out those air defenses. We've largely accomplished that. Now we have the shorter range munitions, and they're far more plentiful. Not to say we shouldn't be concerned about it, but I think it's not as much of a concern as I think people are making. We've got enough weapons for this particular military campaign.
That's an interesting take. I think a lot of people have had that take. Appreciate you sharing that. We'll see what gives. Meanwhile, Oval Office, Jackie Heinrich with the question to the Commander-in-Chief. Watch.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder
that.
why they kept saying that, smart mouth. Why would they, if that is true, even if that was true, why would you say that out loud? Because if you think that Iran ain't watching our news, you sadly mistaken. They damn sure watching it. They try to push this narrative like that.
President Xi told you that China would not give or sell Iran.
And he knows I'd be quite disappointed. Yeah, please. And he's coming here, I think, on September 24th.
Oh, if this happens, that would be a major issue for the U.S., especially with our airplanes trying to fly through those areas. Will this happen, do you believe? Will Xi make this move?
Well, it would be a disaster, frankly. I mean, what Xi Jinping has essentially been providing diplomatic...
Hey, smart mouth, let me ask you this. How hard would it be to drop a bioweapon over there that disorients people, that makes them dizzy? You know what I mean? Where they couldn't function and where they couldn't even shoot them shoulder fired rockets. They can't be that fucking hard. Hell, I mean, maybe, you know that they got shit like that.
basically support for the Iranian operation. The Chinese, of course, have backed the Iranians in the past with component parts and weapons. But during the heat of this war right now, this would be a major escalation on the part of the Chinese to get engaged in this. If we do have any indication that the Chinese are doing this, I think it's appropriate for the president to attribute this and name and shame what the Chinese are doing, because these wars in these different geographic areas are increasingly converging, Bill. We saw that the Russians, of course, were shipping some component parts and weapons to the Iranians as well, and the Ukrainians took out that ship. These areas are converging, and the United States has to have a plan for how to deal with this.
Just to point on that, the president has not yet signed off on the additional military hardware to Taiwan. It's upwards of $10 billion.
And that's something else, too.
Is
We got
this potential?
lasers, dude, and I don't know why they're not using them. Maybe they don't want to take a chance on the ship that carries it getting hit, or what it is. But they got lasers that can fucking set them rockets off, set them missiles off. I don't know why they're not using them, but
Actually, a game of chicken between these two leaders.
Yes, I think obviously Xi Jinping does not want to see the United States delivering these weapon sales, but of course,
you know what I mean, so they get a chance to see it or whatever. But if you think that they ain't got lasers that can penetrate shit like that,
my argument, my assessment is the United States should get these weapons to Taiwan, because that's going to deter Xi Jinping from thinking he can act aggressively against Taiwan. If the United States is going to be restrained by not delivering these weapons, we would expect the Chinese obviously not to be helping the country that we are in a war with right now, which is Iran.
That's right. A war that is underway, or conflict, however you characterize it. In Taiwan, there is no war today. Let's hope it stays that way. Rebecca, good to have you on. Thanks for coming
something
back.
else, the American people should quit buying anything made from China. That's how you do your part at home. There ain't much you can do, but you can damn sure figure out and realize where you spend your money and where your money is being spent at. Anything that's made in China, just don't buy it. It costs a little more to buy American made, but I would rather have American made products than some China shit anyway. But that's just me. That's just me. But most people don't look at that shit when they go to pick it up and put it in their cart. They look at it and go, oh, I like this, and that's it. It doesn't matter where it comes from. But
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
yeah, I try to buy nothing but American.
Speed up new construction and remodeling jobs with Froth Pak foam system.
Let's see what
It's an
all
all-in-one system for air sealing and
Matt's
insulating. Froth Pak is Class A fire rated with an R value of 12.2. Plus, it's formulated to spray.
Oh, hell, what the hell did I do? Matt Morris TV live stream.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. My name is Matt Morris, and you are tuning in to the Morris Report. And I will tell you what today, folks, boy, howdy, do we have a hell of a lot to talk about today. First off, everybody's talking about this right now, folks. Something absolutely catastrophic has just taken place across the Atlantic over in Europe. And I hate to be the guy that has to say this right out of the gate here, but all of this could have been avoided if they had just listened to President Trump. Well, we're going to break it all down. Bear with me here. Also, folks, back over here in the United States, we are now less than 100 days away ahead of the 2026 midterms. The Republicans this morning have just gotten a huge, unexpected amount of support from someone that you all might be familiar with. And I'm not going to give away his identity yet, but as a little bit of a hint here, well, he's a trillionaire. We're going to break it all down. And also, we just got some fraud crackdown updates that are going to, frankly, absolutely blow your socks off today. The Democrats, meanwhile, well, they are absolutely enraged. They are livid. The federally funded gravy train is officially over, folks. We have a lot to talk about. Do me a favor. Make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to follow. Make sure to like. Find us everywhere. Rumble, Spotify, Podcasts, Apple Podcast, MorrisReport.com. But folks, why don't we go ahead and just cut the jib jab here and go ahead and get right into the news today? Because, man, like I said, boy, howdy, we really have a lot to talk about. First off, let's talk about what is going on, really probably right this very minute, over in Europe. Let's get into it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, all they had to do was listen to Trump. Let me go ahead and ask all of you folks a question. What do you think happens when you give hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of third world illegal aliens amnesty? Do you think that's the end of it? Do you think that that solves the immigration problem? Do you think that your society gets better or safer or more prosperous? No, of course not. Absolutely not. Really, here's what they don't want you to know. Amnesty for illegal aliens is really just the first step towards complete and total civilizational collapse. Something that over in Europe, they have just found out the hard way, in Spain specifically. In fact, you know what? To really set the table here, why don't we go through some very recent history to put everything into context here? Folks, take a look at this report from just 10 days ago. More than 1.2 million illegal aliens applied for legal status under Pedro Sanchez's new regularization program, more than double the government's expected 500,000. Now, Pedro Sanchez is the prime minister, president, whatever, of Spain, and he is a very far left. They call him a socialist. Really, frankly, he's a communist. Let's be honest. Immigration officials now warn that family reunification could eventually bring up to 3 million additional third world relatives into Spain, claiming that each successful applicant could later sponsor several family members. We see the same thing over here in the United States of America. Applicants had to show that they were in Spain before January 1st, 2026, that they had lived there continuously for at least 5 months prior and had no criminal record. Those approved will receive a 1-year residence and work permit. This is amnesty in Spain is what they passed. And now they've got 1.2 million illegal aliens given amnesty. Really, they're never going to leave, and they're going to bring their family in as well. Sanchez says the amnesty is an act of justice that will support economic growth. Spain's opposition parties, PP and Vox, argue it will encourage further illegal immigration.
That's my
Wow,
wife
of course
in the truck
it will.
here in Orange County, Florida.
Yep.
14 million views as of this morning. The comments are exactly what you'd think they are.
Yeah.
So I let her take the truck.
No, you didn't. 'Cause you're not real.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, this report here is from 10 days ago. Just to kind of give you the background here. You know what we saw today? We saw mass illegal immigration into Spain. This is footage from this morning in Spain. Take a look at this. Tens of thousands illegal aliens, specifically from Morocco, well, through Morocco, probably from all over Africa and the Middle East, came this morning flooding into Spain. Tens of thousands of them. Total chaos. This is an invasion. And we have a lot of clips here, literally storming the beaches as if it were Normandy on D-Day. We have another clip here. They're just taking over. And the reason why is because Communist Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, not too long ago, gave amnesty. They said, okay, well, that means we've got the green light. Now everybody's coming in. They're not even trying to deport them. They're giving them amnesty. Well, I'm sure many of you have read the infamous children's book called If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. If you give a mouse a cookie, then he asks for a napkin. Then he asks for a glass of milk. Then he asks for a straw. Then Then You've all read the book.
Rat
If you
trap,
give an illegal alien amnesty, then you have 10 million more illegal aliens flooding into the country, and they all want amnesty as well. Then they want to bring in their grandma and their sister and their brother and their uncle and their 10 cousins. This is what happens. Like I said, amnesty, very topical, timely these days. Amnesty is a Trojan horse. You let them into the gates, then they open up the gates from the inside, and boom, before you know it, your country is a third world hellhole. And we have seen this take place time and time and time again. Don't believe me? Take a look. Here's another video. They literally opened the gates. They opened the gates. They stormed the country. Tens of thousands of these third world. And you notice something here. You see any women? You see any women or children? No, it's all young military age men. Literally, not a single woman, baby, child in sight. Young military age men. Many of whom will go on to be terrible criminals, butchering and pillaging their way across all of Europe. Because, by the way, they know that if they can make their way into Spain, if they can get amnesty in Spain, then really they can do whatever they want into Europe. Spain is part of the European Union. Okay, this is a free travel zone. If you're in Spain, you can walk, take a bus, take a train up into Portugal, up into France, up into Germany. You can go anywhere you want, and they know that. Okay, that's what's going on here. Now, Pedro Sanchez, communist prime minister of Spain, he chimes in. He says this, Presidente, my apologies. He says, in response, as all of this is happening, the government of Spain is fully committed to providing an immediate response to the situation in Ceuta. That's the name of the town. We are mobilizing all necessary resources, working with Moroccan and international authorities, and preparing the necessary measures to restore normalcy as soon as possible. I just conveyed this to the president of Morocco. This is the moment to build solutions with responsibility and cooperation. Folks, as far as he considers, the solution here is amnesty. The solution is subsidizing them with Spanish taxpayer dollars. That is what do you think he's going to round these people up and deport them? No. In fact, we got the confirmation. Take a look at this. Sanchez's government does not consider the invasion of Ceuta a national emergency. The Interior Ministry said it will protect border integrity, but cannot declare a formal national emergency solely over migration. As a result, Ceuta's local authorities cannot access special emergency funds or deploy the army. The ministry insists on using only standard police reinforcements and regular legal procedures. Now, fun fact, what is the size of Ceuta's little Spanish town? What is the size of their local police force? How many police officers do they have to work with here? Well, the answer is about 150. They've got 150 police officers, and that's on rotation. I don't know, maybe 50 are active at any one time. So let's say they were able to have all their police officers out on the streets right now today trying to get these people out or arrest them or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Folks, we're talking tens of thousands. This is an invasion force.
I caught a couple good ones.
From the third world.
See one of them? Hold on,
tens of
Let me end this right here. Let me stop sharing for a second. I'll show you a quick little preview of what we was doing out here this weekend. Just a little quick one. You see, young. Oh.
out of here.
I actually cut that video down. And that's what it's about. That's what you call a nice Florida redfish. He's in the freezer right now. Yes, sir. He about wore me out there because it was a half a pound for the bucket. I hate this damn, when you load these shorts up now, the original video, you can see the whole scale. Why, how it got like that, I had no idea, but he weighed 7 pounds. 7 pounds. Not bad. Not bad. I got a freezer full of them things, man. They are, to me though, they are one of the best best fish out there to eat. They're real clean, and they don't taste like fish. That's all I know. Back on get our video back up here. I'm gonna get our video back up. Turn it, turn it, turn it, turn it.
They've got 150 police officers, and that's on rotation. I don't know, maybe 50 are active at any one time. So let's say they were able to have all their police officers out on the streets right now today trying to get these people out or arrest them or whatever. Folks, we're talking tens of
that's why
thousands.
you don't eat no shark.
This is an invasion force from the third world of tens of thousands.
Nasty.
And the local police have been denied support from the military, from the army. Sorry, hey, this actually isn't a national emergency. Good luck. Good luck is what they were told by Spain's federal government. Now, the Spanish opposition leader,
I've never been to
his name is Santi Abascal.
Let's see what this old crazy fucker right here has got to say.
I'm filming this on July 30th. All information is up to date as of July 30th. And what many people feared was inevitable has happened, and that is Russia has launched a cruise missile strike on a NATO country. That is right, Poland, hit by a Russian cruise missile strike. We're going to get into exactly what happened. I predicted this was happening. What is Russia's real plan here? Was it an accident? I'm going to tell you right now it wasn't, and I'm going to prove to you what is actually happening here. You can't get this information anywhere else on the internet. We got a ton to break down. You don't want to miss it. Before we do, please make sure to like and subscribe. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. How do you want to see NATO respond?
Hey, and you know what, Bulldog? It is crazy to watch the people respond to Trump the way they do, because they watch a fucking YouTube video or they watch some video where somebody's criticizing a man, and then all of a sudden their mind's made up about him without really knowing what the fuck's going on. I don't know, man. It's made me lose a little hope in humanity, to be honest with you. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again till the day I fucking die. You cannot convince me that that man's in the fucking Epstein list. They had a 1-800 number designed where you could call and make reports, and they had to put that shit in with the Epstein list. But why would Trump tell on Epstein if he was fucking minors with him? That doesn't make any sense to me. Do you know how stupid you have to be to believe that?
What comes next? Get active in the comments below. Hit the notification bell. All notifications turned on. You won't miss a thing. And then Instagram, David_Hookstead, XD Hookstead. That's where you can find me on social media. My DMs are wide open. Reach out with whatever you got. Now, let's get into it. So I'm going to set the stage here. Russia carried out a massive missile attack on Ukraine through the night of when.
Listen, Bulldog, when I really realized something was different about Trump, that he was special, and people get pissed off by it, I don't give a fuck, but when I realized that he was special and he was different is when everybody was attacking him. You never seen a president get attacked the way that they did Trump. They tried to change the public opinion about that man right off the rip. They wanted to damage his credibility and his image. And to me, that just spoke volumes. Just like calling him racist and all that shit. Back in the day, all the rappers wanted to be like Trump. They wanted Trump around. Then all of a sudden he becomes the president and they turn this fucking racist narrative on him. And all of a sudden he's a big racist piece of shit. It's like, get the fuck out of here. Quit letting these idiots think for you. Start thinking for your fucking self a little bit. Shit's
Wednesday, July
crazy,
29th
man.
into the morning hours of Thursday, July 30th. During that attack, missiles entered Polish airspace with at least one confirmed direct hit. A cruise missile landed in Poland. This is not an accident. What this is Russia testing NATO's resolve, testing limits. So the footage we have right here is some of the air raid sirens. This is when the missiles entered Polish airspace.
This
That's
professional
got to be an
32
eerie
terabyte
sound, though, while you bullshitting to hear them fucking
SSD,
missile
capable
sirens
of
going
holding
off.
the entire collection of the New York Public Library, is something you won't find at Best Buy or any electronics
Me and Jerry was talking about that last night while we was sitting on the dock. I was like, Jerry, God forbid if anything ever happens out here, but you know, if they come after us, you do realize where they're going to hit first, right? And I was like, they'll hit Washington, they'll hit West Virginia, and they'll hit Mayport. That's just where they're going to bomb at. And he's like, you think so? I said, well, think about it. That's the key places. You've got Kingsland Naval Base, you've got Mayport, you've got Washington or Virginia port there. I don't know the name of it. And then you got Washington, D.C., all on the East Coast. Them are major target spots. If they're gonna invade, they're gonna invade that right off the rip.
Very ominous, very ominous. And then right here is another look.
They're musty, bro. It's hard. I don't mind trout. I just don't like cleaning them.
The sirens. So this is the sirens as they're going. And then right here, this is a look at the moment of impact of the Russian cruise missile shaking buildings. So right there, that is the impact. The shock waves shaking buildings. You can see from the camera shaking. And then right here, a Russian KH-101 cruise missile flew at least 90 kilometers into Poland and hit an area near Tarawana, Colonia early Thursday. The impact
They
was
make
at
very good fish beds for sure. I remember doing that as a kid.
3:45 a.m. local time, caught on camera. So right there, that is the impact. Let's listen to it again. So a direct hit from the Russian cruise missile. And then right here, you can see smoke rising from where the Russian cruise missile hit more than 90 kilometers into Poland. So you can see the smoke coming up, clean detonation of the Russian cruise missile. And then right here gives you part of the look. It says local residents in the Polish village of Targowisko heard a massive explosion this morning and found a crater in a field. Follows report of Russian cruise missile entering Polish airspace overnight. Now, for the exact area this happened, this is the part of Poland it is in. It's kind of in the south, on the border, south of in Poland.
Check this out. I'm going to show you how I afforded this car. Okay, you ready? All right, $118 for car insurance. That's how much I was paying. Okay, I picked.
We can zoom in. It is kind of a rural farming area, striking in the field area just outside of the city. So it is a direct strike. And then right here, this is a look at the impact of where the cruise missile hit, at least 100 kilometers into Polish territory. So it says what appears to have been a Russian KH-101 air-launched cruise missile flew 100 kilometers into Poland before striking. This was done under the cover of the missile attack on Ukraine. And then footage right here of the Polish scrambling helicopters during the attack. They are looking for where the missiles went. We now know one of the impact, but this is footage of the Polish scrambling helicopters.
So they didn't hit anything? Is that what they're saying? Oh, you good, Kevin. You good, bro. Damn, look at that little
And this
thing. That
is a
looks
look
weird
at
as
the
fuck.
rescue team, the fire department teams, and we can see more of that here. So you can see a massive crater in the ground. Photos of the general
Oh, they
area
knew
it
where they
is.
were shooting. They did that on purpose.
And then right here. So first, before we get into that, I'm going to say this. I'm going to pull this off the screen, but stick with me because I'm going to put something else on the screen here shortly. But let's talk very clearly about what is going on here. What is going on here is Russia is testing and probing NATO. They just missile struck a NATO country. Now, fortunately, no one was killed. Doesn't appear anyone was hurt. It struck a field outside of a small town, 100 plus kilometers into Poland. What the Russians are doing is they are trying to see what they can get away with. They're going to say this was an accident. This was an accident. We didn't mean to do this. This is not an accident. This is an airborne launch cruise missile, which means it is launched from an aircraft platform, likely one of their bombers. These missiles are very accurate. They don't just go hundreds of miles off course. They're not like low-level drones, which can do that. This was a deliberate, purposeful attack to essentially gauge NATO response times in Poland. Poland was not able to shoot it down, and they're trying to bait Poland to see what Poland is going to do. What is NATO going to do? And the fact of the matter is you have to be hard resolve here. You can't let them get away with this. And I'm now going to put this up on the screen. A little Hookstead
This
in
motherfucker
Hookstead.
pisses me off, man, when he starts. You can't let them get away with this. You can't do that. He always talking about what they should do. Motherfucker, you run a podcast. You sit in the comfort of your own home. So quick to try to put people out there to be fucking killed. That shit drives me nuts. I'm sorry, y'all, but it does. That shit drives me fucking insane.
Fox 35 investigative reporter Marie Edinger joins me live now. And Marie, today is a rare double execution day here in the state of Florida. 2 inmates on death row for decades going to be put to death today. And that's not something we see very often where there's 2 in one day like this.
No, this would be the first time in 62 years if both of them do wind up executed. James Duckett is scheduled for noon today, and Dominic Ochacon is scheduled for 6 p.m. So if those do both go through, they have both made these last minute appeals to the U.S. Supreme Court. But if both do happen, first time in 62 years.
So one was accused of killing a little girl from Lakeland in 1987, and it's taken him. I know we way off topic of what we started, but one of them is accused of killing a little girl in 1987. 1987. It's almost 2027. Holy shit, man.
Do you have a question, Garrett?
No, I was just going to say, go talk to us a little bit about the cases here. What led to them being put on death row and facing these death sentences today?
Sure. So that would be the left of your screen. That's James Duckett. He was a Mascot police officer. That's a small city in Lake County. And
This is where Unc was in prison now, right here, right across the street. I used to cut the grass over here. It used to drive me fucking nuts when they would put these guys to death over there. I'd have to go out there and groom the grass and make it all real pretty. It fucked with me bad. It really did.
1986, he wound up convicted in 1987. He was first accused, now convicted, of the murder of an 11-year-old girl. Teresa Maccabee is her name. The story goes he was patrolling as a police officer and ran into this 11-year-old girl at a gas station right down the road from her house near that lake that you just saw on your screen a moment ago. He told her to go home because he'd seen her talking with this 16-year-old boy, said, "You're too old." And so he had her go in his his car and said he was taking her home. After a while of her not getting there, getting back to her house, her mom started looking for her. She went again right down the road. I've been to this home and I've been to this gas station or where it once stood. And it is really just a very short walk. It probably should have taken her 2 minutes at most to get there. And she was just buying a pencil to do her homework. So when she wasn't home after a bit, her mom started looking and actually called police. And James Duckett then got involved in the search for her. He was accused of killing her after the other police officers found tire tracks that matched the very specific ones on his car. He had driven a police car that night, obviously, and the tire marks were specifically associated with snow tires. And the shop that serviced the police department's cars at the time had accidentally put snow tires on his cars. So they left this very distinct mark that pointed to him. And then investigators found on the hood of his car his fingerprints intermingled with the 11-year-old girl's in a pattern that they said was kind of scooching backward on the hood of the car. He was the last person seen with her until she was found a bit later in a lake. She'd washed up drowned and she'd been raped. There has been a lot of things to come out of this more recently, namely DNA tests that have been argued over for the past few months. Duckett was supposed to be put to death back in February, but there was this last minute stay of his execution because his attorneys argued that they wanted to test this DNA. They said the evidence that led to his conviction and his conviction on appeal and his conviction upon multiple appeals after that over the decades, they said all of that evidence was circumstantial. And so they wanted to test this DNA. They'd had an opportunity in the past, but they said the technology just wasn't there yet to get a good reading out of it and that it might destroy the sample. So they put that on hold until it turned out he really was up for execution. They did test this DNA, but the results came back inconclusive. And the results of the testing were that it actually destroyed the sample. There's now an argument that's just come out in the past week or so from his defense team that the state knew it was going to destroy the sample in the course of testing. The defense team had wanted to test it at a different lab that they thought might be more capable. And they now want other things tested. A judge just came out with a ruling saying, no, if you wanted multiple other things tested for DNA, you should have asked back in February when we approved this last round. So that got tossed, and any further motions or further attempts to delay his execution were overruled by the Florida Supreme Court. And so his execution is now scheduled for noon today.
Damn, that's crazy.
Sick
Most
of paying
of
for
them are
hours you
around
aren't even
6
sure your
o'clock.
team actually worked? See this little sticker tag?
Let's see what old Grug got to say.
Your next breakdown could cost thousands.
Unless you have endurance. I will never pay for covered car repairs.
Immediately upon investigation, we learned that, in fact, this suspect, James Duckett, in the Lake County rape and murder of an 11-year-old, had lived in the McDuffie's trailer park 1 mile south of Fort Meade and only 1.8 miles from where Jennifer's body was found. Now, keep in mind, Jennifer was abducted way north of Lakeland. She was found 45 minutes to an hour south, at the far south end of the county, only 1.8 miles from where the suspect, James Duckett, once lived before he was a Mascot police officer. The investigation went on. We know that on June 19th, when Duckett was fired from the police department and was under investigation for the murder, the vicious murder of that 11-year-old child, that he was reemployed by the mines. He had worked at the mines before, the W.R. Grace mines. We know that he drove from the Webster area in Sumter County, where he was currently living, south on Highway 98 every day to go to work. We know on September 19th, that fateful night that Jennifer disappeared, that he left for work 5 hours before he was to show up at work. He left his home, where his wife was located and 2 children.
Jesus Christ, man.
He wasn't to go to work until 11 p.m. that night. And Duckett, throughout our investigation, was always found to be prompt and always on time to work, whether it was the police department or whether it was the mines. They said the guy just is not late. On that evening, when he left 5 hours early and drove down Highway 98, north of Lakeland, he drove exactly past where Jennifer Weldon would have been walking home. That night, he was 2 hours late showing up for work. And he was never late. When he arrived, he was hot, he was sweaty. He said he had car trouble, but they noticed his hands weren't greasy or nasty or dirty, but he seemed a little upset or agitated. But he went to work. Now he returned home at 9 o'clock Saturday morning to his wife and child. He went in and he gave his wife a green bag containing candy and a kitten, a gray kitten, just like this. And he said, I brought this for the children. She said, you brought one toy for 2 children, and she threw it away.
Just goes to show you never fucking know.
Yeah, she's got on her stomach as well. What?
And that girl's eyes beat shut. All right, y'all. I'm fixing to go drink me some coffee.
Immediately.
And find something to do. I'm fitting to go get in something. I appreciate y'all chilling with me today. We'll see y'all later. Y'all be safe. Peace.